Chapter 420. Little Match Who Sells His Daughter. The following is from Baidu. Tuoyue is a tool for blowing and burning. Is there a Tuoyue between heaven and earth in Laozi? It's empty but unyielding, it moves but it comes out. There are unearthed portraits from the Han Dynasty. Tuoyue has 3 wooden rings, 2 round plates, and is made of leather. The principle is similar to the bellows, but it shouldn't be as good. Otherwise, the old man wouldn't have answered that way. Little Match Who Sells His Daughter. I'll check Baidu. Baidu said that the double-action piston bellows is the most important invention in Hua country. It's definitely more advanced than the Tuoyue. If Zhang Pengji was alone, she might have to spend a lot of time on this thing. But the viewers in the streaming room worked together, which greatly reduced the difficulty. Double-action piston bellows? Zhang Pengji fell into deep thought. What came to her mind wasn't the bellows, but the contents of the mechanical foundation course. If the bellows were derived from the Tuoyue, the two should have something in common. She asked the old man if there was a Tuoyue in the workshop. Then, under the old man's confused gaze, she studied the Tuoyue over and over again. I think I have an idea. This should be able to raise the temperature in the kiln to meet the conditions for baking bricks. The old man saw her sitting on the floor, taking out new bamboo paper and laying it on the ground. He took a piece of charcoal and started drawing. His originally calm expression instantly cracked. I didn't expect you to be such a frivolous district magistrate. Why are you playing tricks instead of doing your job properly? The viewers in the streaming room also said, Streamer, why aren't you obediently fighting for the world? Why are you inventing? Streamer, if you steal someone else's job, the Mahist will cry in front of you. On the other side, Zhang Pengji was playing around with the tricks in the eyes of others. Her subordinates were already crazy busy. Luoyue led 500 imperial guards to patrol everywhere. Not only did they have to pay attention to threats from the outside world, but they also had to pay attention to the security in the city. Needless to say, the facts proved that Zhang Pengji had foresight. Luoyue caught 4 or 5 human traffickers who wanted to steal children or forcefully buy them. At first, he could still maintain a calm expression. He ordered his men to beat up the human traffickers according to the law and fine them a sum of money. Later, he directly arrested them and threw them into the district headquarters prison. If it wasn't for someone stopping him, he would have pulled out his sword and chopped them up. Damn bear, didn't he see that they were so busy that their feet didn't even touch the ground, wishing they could hit the back of their heads with their feet? To think that there would be such an ignorant fellow who would bump into me and increase my workload. Luo Yu, who was exhausted from working overtime, felt that anyone who tried to disrupt the peace and order of the county deserved to die. In reality, Luo Yu's situation was still considered good. The other people's situation could be said to be in Azura's battlefield. Qiguan Rang had never liked to stand out, but household registration was no small matter. He had to take it seriously. 50 to 60,000 people at the very most, and every single one of them had to be registered. How long would it take for him to be so busy? After 2 days in the Azura field, he couldn't care less about his demeanor and almost roared at Zhang Pengji. They wanted him. They wanted him. They wanted him. Important things must be repeated 3 times. However, 99 out of 100 people were illiterate, let alone able to write. Where was she going to find someone who could read and write for him? Qiguan Rang's eyes were bloodshot and bloodshot. He had completely lost his poise. I don't care, you have to give me the person, or I'll die in front of you. Zhang Pengji did not even dare to guess what realm the man had reached in his cultivation. In order not to drive Qiguan Rang crazy, Zhang Pengji could only think of a way. Perhaps it was a blessing from the heavens. She saw Takshu, who was serving her tea, and suddenly had an idea. She said excitedly, There's someone. Who? Zhang Pengji said, Aren't there a few girls living in the backyard of the district headquarters? They were originally from an extraordinary background. If it wasn't for the Tsing-Yi army, they wouldn't have fallen to such a state. Not to mention how talented they are, I think they should be able to write. Why don't we hire a few to be your clerks and help you with the registration? Qiguan Rang furrowed his brows and said, Sure. Before those girls met with misfortune, they were all famous rich girls in Xiangyang district. As the saying goes, the poor raise their children, the rich raise their daughters. All of them were literate, so it was not a problem for them to help with household registration. However, they still had to seek their opinions on this matter. Fortunately, Xiangyang district was north of Dongqing, so the atmosphere was not affected by the neighboring country, Zhongzhou. It was not a big deal for the girls to show their faces. Hearing this, the girls looked at each other. After hesitating, 9 girls agreed to help. The others either felt tired or felt that it was beneath them to deal with the commoners. Qiguan Rang was too lazy to express his opinion. He asked someone to prepare men's clothing for the 9 girls and even asked them to make their faces coarser. Then he pulled them away. Before Jiang Pengji could heave a sigh of relief, Feng Jin quietly came to the door. He did not say anything, he just looked at her. She felt a little guilty. "Why are you done with your work?" Feng Jin said with a pair of heavy eye bags. He had only slept for an hour for a few days in a row. The circles under his eyes were a little dark. "I haven't seen Chongqing and Jingxian for 3 days. I'm so busy that I don't even have time to see my wife and daughter." "My lord, don't you feel bad about this?" Jiang Pengji said innocently. "I have no one here." "I cried, threw a tantrum, and threatened to hang myself." "My lord, I don't want to make things as ugly as Wenjing," Feng Jin said faintly. The audience in the streaming room was extremely distressed. They continuously lashed out at Jiang Pengji, the Zhou Bapi. "Lao Siji Lianming. Look at you, streamer, what sins have you committed?" Chongbing Jianwu, a good son of an aristocratic family, was forced to say that he cried, threw a tantrum, and threatened to hang himself. "It's a human tragedy." Han Yutong. "That's enough. Streamer, do you have the heart to see Feng Jin hang himself in front of you?" Pia Pia Weong. "Aren't there more than 10 women in the backyard of the district headquarters? Ask them. All of them are literate and can write. Host, can you bear to watch them eat rice and do nothing? Those are all shining grains. They don't fall from the sky. They cost money. You absolutely can't bear it. If you threaten and bribe them, they must work. If they refuse to work, the ones kneeling are your strategists." Feng Jin said faintly, "Yesterday, Jingxian sent someone to deliver a letter. She said that Chongqing misses her father." Jiang Pengji held it in for a while and said, "I'll try." After sending Feng Jin off, Jiang Pengji did not have time to catch her breath. Meng Hun came from outside again. "I really have no one here. If you don't believe me, go to the backyard and take a look." Meng Hun was dumbfounded. He said, "What do you mean there's no one in the backyard?" Jiang Pengji coughed softly and said, "Nothing." Meng Hun then began to report the progress of the past 2 days. Speaking of miserable, Meng Hun was also very busy these days. He slept less than 2 hours a day. Even his meals were eaten while he was on the road. However, he was too honest. He always worked hard and did not complain no matter how hard or tired he was. After reporting the progress, he returned to his post and continued to fight. Jiang Pengji heaved a long sigh of relief. She ate some dry steamed buns to fill her stomach. She asked Takshu to get a basin of water for her to wash her feet. She lowered her head to clean the blisters on her feet. Wooden clogs broke easily. Straw sandals rubbed her feet. She had been climbing up and down for the past few days and was very tired. At that moment, a message came from outside saying that Xueqi had arrived. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Not only was she speechless, but the audience in the streaming room was also convulsing with laughter. They kept saying that she was getting what she deserved. Chapter 421. Looking at the screen full of ridicule, Jiang Pengji felt like she was about to collapse. Host V. "I'm telling you seriously, if you continue to ridicule me, I'm going to throw a tantrum and go on strike." This kind of threat was really weak to the audience. Instead, they laughed even harder. Zuizhen Beishijing, Emperor of Dongqing. "I'm not dead yet, you rebel, how dare you call yourself Emperor?" Buduhuo Badeo, #propping chin. "I feel that sooner or later the host will call herself Emperor. I'm just enjoying it first." Cat Food is here. "Do you guys want to bet on why Xueqi is here? Is he looking for the host to ask for people or to report to her about his work? I think a crying child gets milk. Uncle Meng Hun is too honest. He only works and doesn't talk. I feel sorry for him. I don't think Xueqi is the type to keep quiet. He's probably here to cry too." The audience started to bet. Jiang Pengji put her feet down and put away the tool she used to pick up blisters. In less than 2 breaths, Xueqi walked over with steady steps and bowed to her. Jiang Pengji was scared and asked helplessly, Xiaoyu, are you short of manpower and want to ask me for it? Xueqi looked at her silently, then took out a thick new account book from his sleeve. As an accountant who had been with Zhang Pengji for many years, Xueqi was very familiar with accounting. Zhang Pengji's heart skipped a beat. She took the book from Xueqi and opened it. She almost vomited blood. Xueqi then said, I'm not here to ask for people, my lord. Zhang Pengji calmed herself down, then lowered her head to look at the statistics on the account book. She might as well ask for people. Xueqi was indeed the accountant she valued. He was good at managing internal affairs, but he was also very clever at accounting. In front of her were the rice expenses for this period of time and the following month's various expenses. She didn't know she was so poor. The original food can last for 3 to 4 months, but with the people of Xiangyang district, it's a little hard to make ends meet. Xueqi sighed and deliberately said in a low voice, I really can't do anything. A clever housewife can't cook without rice, right? So I don't care if Lord is turning stone into gold, digging into someone else's granary, or stealing their stored food. If the granary doesn't have enough food, the people who hire you will naturally panic. Zhang Pengji took a deep breath and asked, Xiaoyu, shouldn't I share the Lord's worries under normal circumstances? Xueqi looked at her, raised his hand and pointed at the 2 dark circles under his eyes, and calmly added insult to injury. If I had the ability to be separated, I would naturally share my master's burden. Xueqi was expressionless. It's a pity that I'm just an ordinary person and don't have that kind of supernatural power. Even if we split it in half, it would still be a drop in the bucket. My lord, do you still want to hear anything else? He only wanted food. It was already good enough that he didn't join in the fun and ask for people. Zhang Pengji almost couldn't control the nerves in the corners of her mouth. She took a deep breath. She said, Leave the food to me. Xueqi cupped his hands respectfully and prepared to leave to continue working overtime while waiting for the food to be stored in the warehouse. Zhang Pengji was depressed. She shouted outside, Takshu, bring me some cosmetic powder. These people were bullying her for having good skin and not having dark circles under her eyes after staying up all night. The audience in the streaming room laughed hysterically as they watched Zhong Sunyuan draw 2 big dark circles under his eyes. Yu Yecheng, ha ha ha, I'm dying of laughter. I feel so sorry for Xueqi and the others' dark circles under their eyes. The lousy streamer exploits her employees and doesn't give them holidays or raises. But the streamer, you drew 2 dark circles under your eyes. Are you purely here to entertain the public? Seriously, what happened to the cold and aloof goddess? Why did she become a joker? Zuyan Katyao. #rubbing face. Am I the only one who realized that the streamer has actually been driven crazy? The subordinates are driven crazy by their work. The streamer is driven crazy by her subordinates and work. They were born from the same root, so why hurt each other? Outsiders thought that Zhang Pengji was playing in the mud and not doing her job properly. But the audience in the streaming room saw everything she did. The energy she spent these few days was no less than that of others. However, the streamer's skin was good, so there was no sign of her staying up all night. She was at a disadvantage. Zhang Pengji calmed herself down and grabbed a wet handkerchief to wipe off the dark circles on her face. She regained her usual cold expression and brought a few troops to transport grain. Although Xueqi didn't find out the truth, the shrewd accountant wasn't that easy to fool. He knew that Zhang Pengji had a way to get a huge amount of grain, but he didn't know how she did it. Using popularity points to buy grain from the mall was simply a fantasy for people in this era. Zhang Pengji didn't want to say it out to scare people, so she simply followed Xueqi's imagination and let him misunderstand that she had the talent to find grain depots. A batch of grain was transported from outside the city. Zhang Pengji watched as the troops stored it in the warehouse. Then she sleepily rubbed her sore eyes. She didn't know how expensive oil and salt were until she was in charge. It would be great if she wasn't the son of an aristocrat. Then, she could shed all pretense of cordiality and seek help from the aristocrats. She would beat you up if you didn't give me the grain. It's not easy to be a good person. Zhang Pengji sighed. It's even harder to be the lord. After all that, she still had to play with mud again. She supervised the construction progress of the brick kiln and went to the mall to buy mud. She mixed the mud she bought from the mall with the local mud. According to the experience of the pottery-making elder, both were suitable for making bricks. However, to save manpower, She directly bought the mud from the mall and hid it somewhere outside the city. It wouldn't take much time to transport it. If she dug the local mud, the manpower cost would be high and it would take a long time. A few subordinates could kill her. Xiangyang district was close to Chengde County, so it was very convenient to buy coal. It was summer now, so there was very little coal. Jiang Pengji ordered people to flip through the coal storage in Xiangyang district and found that there was enough to make 20 kilns of bricks. With enough manpower, it wouldn't take much time to build a simple brick kiln. At that moment, everyone suddenly realized that their lord didn't play with mud anymore. She played with wood. They were dumbfounded. On the surface, she played with wood, but in reality, she was making the double-action piston bellows. If I say, I'm not slacking off, and I'm not doing my job, will anyone still believe me? She hadn't slept for 2 days to make the rubbish bellows. The audience in the streaming room could testify that she hadn't closed the streaming room for 2 days. She looked at Takshu pitifully. Her pitiful expression made Takshu laugh. Takshu comforted her with a smile. When the bricks are out of the kiln, the gentleman will understand. Jiang Pengji's wounded heart was barely healed. Although the audience in the streaming room helped, brickmaking was still a foreign field to Jiang Pengji, not to mention the technicians who were involved. They had never heard of bricks. Whether the bricks could be made or not, and what the results would be, no one was sure. Jiang Pengji waited for the news of the brick kiln. She was perturbed and nervous. However, it seemed that God couldn't stand her peace. Just as the construction of Xiangyang district was in full swing, a piece of news came. Jiang Pengji was so angry that she almost drew her sword and killed someone. Chapter 422. Jiang Pengji did not like to swear. She had always believed in the principle of using her fists instead of her mouth. Since the start of the streaming room, it seemed that only the Xingyi army had enjoyed such a high standard of treatment. What ability did the Xingyi army have to provoke Jiang Pengji into cursing? The audience in the streaming room was also furious. More people expressed their concerns. They hoped that Jiang Pengji could calm down a little and not be blinded by anger. The Xingyi army could fight at any time. If they could not control the situation now, they might lose everything. Xiangyang district was still in a state of construction. Although it had only been a few days, it was already thriving. The audience could totally imagine that after a while, this city might shine with new life. Tumi Dalao. You must be calm, streamer. Don't be impulsive and do something that you will regret. Baidu News Department. Yes, yes. The debt of the Xingyi army can be settled at any time. Streamer, don't be impulsive. Buxiang jogging Zixiangxi. Impulsiveness is the devil. Someone, hold the streamer down. Apart from these persuasions, there were naturally people who jeered. Some were completely malicious, while others were too angry. Xing Shizizi. What are you afraid of? Are you just going to be a coward? The Xingyi army directly stepped on the streamer's head. These heartless fellows deserve to die. If the streamer does not do anything this time, guess how serious the consequences will be? The troops are indeed her private troops. They are all slaves, but they have also shed blood for the streamer. If the streamer does not bring people to save them this time, who will be willing to risk their lives for her in the future? Why Heshabi? Didn't the Xingyi army plead for the people? The streamer's troops saved so many people in Fengyi County. What did the Xingyi army do? They burned, killed, and looted in Xiangyang district. After learning that General Jiu's Xingyi army was destroyed, they directly vented their anger on the 2,000 troops in Fengyi County. They are simply beasts. Jiang Pengji was in no mood to read the bullet screen. She looked at the messenger solemnly. Her lips were tightly shut. The aura around her was filled with blood and ruthlessness. Even though she was dressed cleanly, she still gave the illusion that her whole body was stained with blood. She was like a soul reaper who had crawled out of hell. The technicians, who were looking after the brick kiln, shivered. They did not even dare to look up at her. Jiang Pengji curled her lips and revealed a bloodthirsty smile. I haven't even gone to look for trouble with them, but they've already come knocking on my door. Coincidentally, there's a shortage of manpower here. She didn't know how long she had been holding it in, but her voice had turned from clear to hoarse. It was very uncomfortable to listen to. Jiang Pengji said to the messenger, "Gather a few gentlemen and summon Coach Meng and Coach Luo. We're having a meeting." The last two words were almost squeezed out from the back of his molars, filled with killing intent. Xueqi and the others arrived at the district headquarters one after another. As soon as they entered the door, they saw Jiang Pengji sitting at the seat of honor. Her aura was stifling. Lord, what happened? Xueqi was the first to arrive, but he had never liked to be at the top, so he sat in a more secluded spot. As soon as he sat down, he saw Feng Jin and the others also entering. Their tired faces were filled with suspicion. They hadn't gathered together like this since the last meeting to assign tasks. Something big must have happened. This thought emerged in everyone's mind at the same time. Jiang Pengji didn't answer Xueqi question. She only gestured for them to take their seats before letting the messenger in. She said in a hoarse voice, "Repeat what you just said to the gentleman again." Hearing Jiang Pengji's voice change, their hearts skipped a beat. They tacitly turned their gazes to the messenger. The more they listened, the heavier their hearts sank. The messenger said, "This morning, a severely injured soldier arrived outside the city. After careful identification, he turned out to be one of my lord's troops. The soldier's injuries were severe. He only had time to say, 'The Xueqi army attacked Fengyi County, attacked the troops at night and massacred the people.' Due to his heavy injuries, he fainted and is still in danger." Attacked the troops at night? Massacred the people? When Feng Jin and the others heard this, their hearts sank. Xueqi tightened his grip on the feather fan in his hand. He was the one who brought the 3,000 troops out of Chongzhou. Among them, 1,000 followed him to receive Jiang Pengji, while the other 2,000 went to Fengyi County to rescue the people. The situation in Fengyi County was more dangerous, so after Jiang Pengji took over Xiangyang district, she didn't bring the troops back. However, who would have thought that the Xueqi army would be so narrow-minded? When they heard that General Jiu was killed, they took advantage of Fengyi County's unpreparedness to attack and occupy it. They even attacked the wounded camp where the troops were at night. For a moment, the entire district headquarters was immersed in a heavy atmosphere. After a while, Jiang Pengji heard a flurry of hurried footsteps coming from outside. Another messenger came in. "My lord, the troop who delivered the message has woken up," Jiang Pengji said. "Get someone to carry him in." Not long after, two people carried a stretcher in. A troop covered in blood was lying on it. He was barely breathing and his chest rose and fell weakly. When he saw Jiang Pengji approaching, his dull and lifeless eyes suddenly brightened. Two streams of turbid hot tears rolled down his cheeks. He said with great effort, "Lang Jun, the Xueqi army. That group of bastards, attacked at night, and injured, many of our brothers, are now in limbo. Lang Jun, you must save them." Jiang Pengji clenched her molars and said, "I will bring them back, not one of them is missing." Hearing her promise, the troop's lips trembled a few times. His eyes were filled with nostalgia and regret, but they gradually dimmed. After a while, Feng Jin raised his hand and placed it under the man's nose, then felt his pulse. He said in a low voice, "He's gone." Jiang Pengji bit her lower lip and suppressed the surging murderous intent in her heart. "Carry him away and give him a proper burial." Except for the first few servants she bought and the soldiers brought by Meng Hun, the rest of the troops were basically bandits. In the beginning, they did submit to Jiang Pengji for the sake of survival. But after a long time, they found the feeling of being upright people. Their hearts were filled with hot blood. Even if they were bandits with a goal. They were willing to shed their blood for those who understood them. Their feelings were mutual. They were loyal to Jiang Pengji, so she naturally cherished these subordinates. Jiang Pengji closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she was already calm. She looked at the stretcher that was being carried away and said in a flat voice, "I want to send troops to rescue them." Feng Jin opened his mouth and said after a while, "I can understand my lord's feelings, and I won't stop you now. I hope my lord understands what it means to send troops at this time. There are many things to be done in Xiangyang district. It's so weak that it can't withstand a single blow. If my lord brings troops to support them, I'm afraid." Chapter 423. Xueqi sighed and secretly tugged at Feng Jin's sleeves, giving him a look. His lord would never listen to such a matter of principle. As long as she did not make a decision out of anger, as a strategist, they should support her. In fact, if she chose to give up the 2,000 troops for the sake of the big picture, Qiguan Rang and the rest would be bitterly disappointed. Prepare for war. Zhang Pengji's face was cold. No matter how many people they killed, we will kill them 10 times or 100 times more. Xueqi sighed in his heart. He suddenly felt that days like today would repeat many times in the future.
My lord has made up her mind.
I will obey. Meng Hun took the initiative to volunteer. He looked sincere.
My lord, you must bring me with you in this battle.
The troops were not only Zhang Pengji's private troops, but also the troops that Meng Hun had poured countless efforts into. He must kill the enemy with his own hands and wash away this humiliation with the enemy's blood. Zhang Pengji clasped her fingers together and sat upright on the seat of honor. Her thin lips moved slightly. Coach Meng, bring the troops with me to save people. The defense of the district city will all be under Wenjing's command. Luo, you could not help but volunteer. District Magistrate Lu, please. Zhang Pengji interrupted him and said, It's true that I want to save people, but I can't disregard the lives of the people in Xiangyang district and directly transfer all the troops. The Qingyi army obviously came prepared with a strong desire for revenge. Whether it's the 2,000 troops or you, I don't want to lose them.
Finishing her words, she stood up and walked to the backyard in an unquestionable manner.
Feng Jin and Su could both turn to look at Qiguan Rang with interest. Qiguan Rang could not compare to them in terms of time and friendship with Zhang Pengji, but she was more partial to Qiguan Rang when it came to official matters, especially when it came to war. This time, she even handed over the deployment of the district city to him. This kind of trust was really rare. They were surprised.
Qiguan Rang was even more unprepared.
Go and prepare. My lord does not like to procrastinate. As a housekeeper, Xueqi had a lot of trivial matters to take care of, including the preparation of resources before the war. Feng Jin smiled and said, If that's the case, I will take my leave and check the defense equipment. Qiguan Rang secretly laughed bitterly. He left with Meng Hun, his brows tightly knitted. Meng Hun followed him halfway and said hesitantly, Mr. Wenjiang, the princess's move is a bit. In all fairness, among the three of them, Qiguan Rang's status was probably the lowest. However, Zhang Pengji did not hide her bias. Anyone who was not blind could see it. Meng Hun was worried that there would be internal strife, which would cause estrangement in the hearts of these people. A quarrel between scholars was definitely more terrifying than a general. When Qiguan Rang heard this, he couldn't help but laugh.
Don't worry, Coach Meng. The Lord and the others know it very well.
Meng Hun was an honest man and couldn't wrap his head around it. My lord did this on purpose? Look, Xiao Yu is proficient in internal affairs. No matter how messy the mess is, he can clean it up in his hands. Huai Yu is proficient in foreign affairs. It's just that the Lord's foundation is still shallow, so he hasn't shown his ability yet.
As Qiguan Rang said this, he added somewhat helplessly, Rang is an expert in the path of treachery and is naturally suitable for the battlefield.
My lord sees through everyone's strengths and weaknesses, so Huai Yu and the others won't be unhappy. In terms of war strategy, they all knew it, but they all had their strengths and weaknesses. In the current situation, it was obviously safer for Qiguan Rang to defend the city. If it was a stupid and narrow-minded person, he might have a grudge. However, Su Ku and Feng Jin were different, so Qiguan Rang wasn't worried. I see, I've thought too much, Meng Hun said embarrassedly. Qiguan Rang sighed in his heart. That was what he said, but he really didn't want to stand out. However, the situation was not in his control. If he didn't stand out, he would only lose his life. He must defend the Xiangyang district. Fortunately, the defense equipment of the Xiangyang district was still there. He had recruited many soldiers these few days, so he still had some confidence. Qiguan Rang wasn't like the unruly Qingyi army. If Zhang Pengji broke through the city defense set up by him, it wouldn't be that easy. In less than 2 hours, Xueqi completed the pre-war preparations. The troop of 1,000 people was ready to go. Everyone brought 6 days' worth of dry rations. Zhang Pengji didn't say any nonsense. She simply said, Kill the Qingyi army. We'll bring all our brothers back. The summer wind blew over hot and dry. Her voice was clearly heard by everyone's ears.
Everyone felt as if a heavy boulder was pressing down on their hearts, and under the boulder was a roaring beast that was about to break out of its seal.
Kill the Qingyi army. Bring our brothers back. Meng Hun shouted in a suppressed voice. Kill the Qingyi army. Bring our brothers back. Kill the Xueqi army. Bring our brothers back. Kill the Xueqi army. Bring our brothers back.
The uniform roar resounded in the sky above their heads.
It was deafening.
The anger was about to burst out.
Let's go.
Running with a heavy load was a regular training course for the troops.
Ordinary people would be panting after running 3 to 5 miles. For the troops, they would at most be sweating.
Moreover, they only brought improved crossbows, a bag of arrows, a water bag, and dry rations for the next few days.
This bit of weight couldn't be compared to their usual training.
Naturally, it was easier. Standing at the city gate, Xueqi sighed as he watched Zhang Pengji leave with her men. He ordered his men to strengthen the defense.
Originally, he thought that the next 6 months would be more stable. He was willing to work overtime brainlessly. Who knew that the Xueqi army would be so blind to provoke Zhang Pengji?
According to her vengeful personality, she would definitely wipe out the Xueqi army in Fangyi County.
I guess I'll have a tiring life, he muttered in a low voice.
There was a hidden worry in his eyes as he looked into the distance.
You must come back safely.
After traveling for 4 hours, Zhang Pengji asked her men to stop and rest for 15 minutes.
She spread out the great universal geographical map of Fangyi County.
Meng Hun panted heavily and asked, "My lord, which direction should we go next?"
The weather was too hot. Even if they didn't carry much weight, they were exhausted after a long journey.
However, what made him even more depressed was that the troops who desperately came to ask for help didn't have time to inform the main troops of their location.
Or rather, they didn't know where it was. The terrain of Fangyi County was more complicated. The troops were just outsiders.
It was good enough that they could hold on to reach Xiangyang district to report.
How could they expect anything else?
Therefore, they could only think of a way to determine where the troops were trapped.
This undoubtedly increased the difficulty of rescue. If they made a wrong judgment and took the wrong detour, it would be too late.
Buwei Heshabi, I hope we can make it in time. Otherwise, that young man's sacrifice would have been in vain.
Chapter 424. Zhang Pengji frowned as she looked at the sheepskin map in her hand.
Meng Hun saw that she was focused and did not dare to disturb her.
After a while, she drew a route on the map with her finger. Let's go like this.
Meng Hun looked at the sheepskin map with some doubt in his eyes.
He did not know why she was so sure.
Zhang Pengji panted heavily and drank half of the water in one breath.
Then she threw it back to White's horse ornament.
That person did not say where he was when he was alive, but the marks on his body showed everything.
Zhang Pengji wiped her face with her palms. Her palms were full of hot sweat. It has been hot for a few days without rain. His clothes are stained with large patches of stains.
The original color is almost indistinguishable, but the trousers from his feet to his knees are cleaner than other parts. There are some water plants in his straw sandals, which means that he waded in the water during his escape. From the great universal geographical map, there are rivers and water plants between the two parts of the road.
This is the only place that fits these conditions. I think the troops fought and retreated at the same time and hid here.
I'm not 100% sure, but I can only take a gamble.
Meng Hun looked carefully at the place that Zhang Pengji pointed out.
His expression was solemn. If that's the case, they may still be alive. According to the map, the place that Zhang Pengji pointed out had a winding terrain.
It was easy to hide. I hope so.
She looked calm and undisturbed.
The weather is hot now. It's easy to start a fire in the forest.
If the Xueqi army does not want to waste time searching the mountain and directly sets it on fire, it will be troublesome.
Let's continue our journey.
Now that time was tight, she naturally did not want to delay.
What if they just needed a little more time?
The flowing clouds drifted away, and the orange afterglow shone on the earth.
The air became more and more stuffy, almost suffocating them. Gradually, the night sky darkened.
At the foot of a mountain, a strong middle-aged man sat on a stool. He stared ahead fiercely as if he was dipped in poison. He spat on the ground and said indignantly,
"Bah! I won't let any of these guys go today."
Not far away there were shadows.
"Be quick with your actions.
Today, we will burn them alive on the mountain as a sacrifice to our brothers' souls in heaven. Hurry up, why are you lazing around? If you continue to slack off, the general will whip you to death. Hurry up and get to work." Rustling sounds rang out at the foot of the mountain. Thousands of figures swayed, each of them carrying something in their arms.
Half an hour later,
a middle-aged man dressed in coarse clothes bowed and said to the middle-aged man sitting on the stool, "General, everything is almost ready.
This time, they won't be able to escape even if they have wings."
Not to mention these 3,000 to 5,000 defeated soldiers. Even if 3,000 to 5,000 perfected golden immortals came, they would still be roasted alive.
They would absolutely not be given a chance to escape. Now that the weather was dry, it had not rained for several days. Once the mountain was set on fire, the fire would not stop even if they wanted to. Although he said that, the middle-aged man still felt a little scared. Previously, in order to vent their anger, the Xueqi army launched a sneak attack on the so-called wounded camp at night. However, no one expected these people to react so quickly. Not only did they fail to annihilate all of them, but they were also discovered by the other side. It was laughable that these people were so stupid that they did not forget to bring along those burdens when they fled for their lives. Now they were forced to flee in a sorry state, and there were countless casualties along the way. In the end, they even fled to the mountain in a vain attempt to use the complicated terrain to shake them off. They were simply too stupid. Why did they enter the deep mountains to search? They could just directly set fire to it. These people did not notice that behind a huge rock on the mountain, there was a figure carrying a crossbow hiding. After a while, this person returned to the mountain with a heavy expression.
He panted and said, "These beasts are really planning to set fire to the mountain."
"The foot of the mountain is full of dry firewood. Set fire to the mountain? What should they do?" Hearing this, many people panicked. Most of these people were injured. Many of them were pale and had dark eye sockets. They looked listless. There were old people, children, and many young men and women. In the face of impending death, they could only hug each other and cry bitterly. They originally thought that these people could protect their safety and help them escape, but now they were in a desperate situation. The shadow of death shrouded their hearts. Under such pressure, finally, someone could not help but stand up and roar. "It's all because of you, Jinx, if not for you." Poof! Before this person could finish speaking, an arrow emerged from his knee and blood gushed out. Seeing that person wailing in pain and rolling on the ground while hugging his leg, many people screamed. The scene was almost chaotic. Pow! The person who shot the arrow pulled out the arrow.
He did not mind the blood and dirt, and directly stuffed it back into the quiver.
"I hope you understand that if not for saving you, why would my brothers and I be trapped in this lousy place? My brothers who have followed me for 3 to 4 years died to save you useless people. I didn't complain, so what right do you have to speak? All of you shut up. Whoever dares to make any noise will end up like this."
At this moment, someone laughed sinisterly and echoed, "That's right. If not for our master's generosity, who would want to drag you out from the ruins?
Now that the Xueqi army has come knocking, you're starting to throw away your burdens.
If I had known that I would save a group of ingrates, I would have abandoned you long ago.
Let's see how the Xueqi army treats you.
The men will be beheaded and their legs will be chopped off, the women will be used as prostitutes, and the children will not be spared.
By the way, I used to be a bandit. I don't mind going back to my old profession and killing you first to vent my anger." Enough, the more you speak, the more outrageous you become. The person who spoke was a youth in brown. He sat on a rock, and a silver-white spear was placed beside him. He had dashing eyebrows and bright eyes, and a handsome face. Even though the bloodstains on his face had dried up, it still could not hide his unparalleled beauty. There was a 3-inch-long wound on his left arm. Even though it was tightly bandaged with rags, blood still seeped out.
He seemed not to feel the sharp pain in his arm, and his expression was normal. If not for the troops' words that crossed the line just now, he would not have even frowned.
"Brotherly, we've implicated you this time." Although he was reprimanded, the troop did not seem to be angry. He even smiled apologetically at the youth.
If not for the youth in brown's righteous help, leading them to flee everywhere and relying on the advantage of being familiar with the terrain, they kept approaching Xiangyang district.
Along the way, they caused trouble for the Xueqi army several times. They were afraid that they would not have lasted until now. They would have reported to Yan Luo Jian long ago. The youth with the surname Li shook his head slightly and said in a low voice, "I'm fine. What should we do next? Are we just going to sit here and wait for death?" Someone murmured softly. Everyone was silent. Out of the 2,000 troops,
There were less than 1,000 now. The remaining brothers were all killed by the Xueqi army in order to cover their retreat or protect the people. One by one, they died tragically. Thinking of those scenes, some of them could not help but cover their eyes and cry. Chapter 425. After the youth with the surname Li heard him, he said boldly, "How can I miss out on such a joyous occasion?" The troop member's face was bitter. He said to Li Yun, "Brother Li has already helped us a lot. We can't let you lose your life no matter what. You're skilled in martial arts. You'll definitely break out of the encirclement. We don't ask for anything else. We only ask for Brother Li to go to Xiangyang district and tell our master Lang Jun that even though we're bandits, we have the guts to fight till the end. We didn't embarrass him today." Li Yun stood up with his spear in his right hand. "You're all unyielding men. If I abandon you, I won't feel at ease for the rest of my life. There's no need to say anything. Either we rush down together and fight again, or we walk together on the road to hell. Or we wait for death here. Don't make a fuss." Li Yun's heroic demeanor boosted everyone's morale by a notch. Yes, what was there to be afraid of? Even if they couldn't survive today, at most they would walk on the road to hell. They had so many loyal brothers by their side. They wouldn't be lonely at all. They were originally bandits. Every day, they lived with swords and blood. They were already indifferent to life and death. At most, they would leave a scar as big as a bowl and come back to the human world 18 years later. "Brother Li, I owe you 2 lives. If there's a next life, I'll do anything for you." Li Yun's martial arts were very strong. In the eyes of many troops, he was even stronger than their chief instructor. His spear technique was vigorous. He didn't have any stage fright even when fighting 1 against 10. If it wasn't for Li Yun's help, the troops would have been wiped out. They wouldn't have the chance to talk about their lofty aspirations here. Don't be fooled by Li Yun's usual manner of speaking and smiling, appearing to be very cold and aloof. He was actually very shy on the inside. He smiled shyly at the troops' heartfelt words. He didn't have the slightest sorrow of going to hell. "We're all brothers. Why bother about this?" The troop member was startled. After a while he said with reddened eyes, "Yes, we're all brothers." Given the current situation, the troops had no way to take care of the people. In the beginning, if they abandoned the people, the Xueqi army's night attack wouldn't cause much harm to them. However, in the end, he could not bear to give them up. Once he gave up, these people would practically be sentenced to death. The Xueqi army raised the banner of doing everything for the people, but in reality, they were just a group of mobs venting their inner anger and acting recklessly. Look at the scenes wherever they went. They even looked down on the troops who were originally bandits. Even when they were bandits, they were not as arrogant as the Xueqi army. At this point, they were already helpless. They couldn't even protect themselves, so how could they protect these commoners? Everyone in the troop packed up the few arrows in the quiver, checked the use of the crossbows, and wiped the daggers or long knives on their waists. They all looked serious, as if they were not going to die, but were preparing for some kind of solemn ceremony. Everyone made up their minds. Even if they died, they wouldn't let those bastards have a good time. The solemn atmosphere affected the young children, and once they opened their mouths, they wailed loudly. A little girl in a red cotton-padded jacket, she looked no more than 4 or 5 years old. She escaped with her sister. She grabbed the corner of a troop's shirt with her little hand. Her watery eyes became rounder because she was starving, and tears welled up in her eyes. She looked at the troop pitifully. "Uncle. Hungry." The troop lowered his head and looked at her. They looked at each other silently for a while. Then, he searched his body with both hands and found a bag of dry steamed buns. Then, he took off his water bag. "Soak yourself in the water and go on your way after you're full. Even if you die, don't be a hungry ghost." The child shouted inarticulately, unwilling to take the water bag and the steamed buns. "Uncle, don't go," the troop sighed. If he hadn't joined the bandits that year, he might have gotten married and had a daughter this big. "Take it. I'll help you chase away the bad guys. Then we'll eat together." Although it was a dry steamed bun, it had been kept warm by his body. In addition, the weather was relatively hot, so it was not very hard. If it was mixed with some water to eat, half of it would be 30% full. The troop ruthlessly pried open the child's meaty claws.
He got up and strode away to gather with his brothers. Even if they were to die, they had to do something big before they died. The foot of the mountain was surrounded by more than 4,000 members of the Xueqi army. More than 100 torches burned fiercely, reflecting their faces into an orange color. Burn. Everyone stay here and guard. Let's see if these people are really so strong-willed. I don't believe that they can bear not to come out when they're being roasted with smoke and fire. Kill whoever comes out. Actually, it's better if they don't come out. I heard that human flesh tastes good. If it's cooked, don't let it go to waste. Many members of the Xueqi army looked terrified when they heard the cruel words from the burly man, but more of them looked fanatical. They raised their torches high and were about to fall. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Arrows shot out from the darkness with a final roar. In an instant, many members of the Xueqi army fell. The Xueqi army had fought with this troop several times and had suffered greatly from the crossbows. They had also learned their lesson. After the first round of shooting ended, those who were not injured immediately used their comrades' corpses as shields. Seeing that, the burly man was enraged. Set fire, burn them to death. As soon as he finished speaking, a silver-white ray of light pierced through the air and shot straight at his face. The burly man was shocked. He rolled sideways to avoid it, but the person standing with him was not so lucky. He was skewered by a silver-white spear. Li Yun used the troop as a cover and killed his way to the bandit leader. He used his spear very well. It left behind indistinguishable shadows of the spear. It was so fast that the naked eye could not follow it. Such a strong attack forced the bandit leader to retreat continuously. He even used the members of the Xueqi army beside him as a shield and became his scapegoat. Seeing the bandit leader's actions, Li Yun's eyes turned cold. Coward! The momentum of the spear changed. The body of the spear made an arc and bypassed the shield like a snake. It stabbed straight at the man's face. If he was stabbed, it would at least pierce through the man's head. Li Yun's face darkened. The feeling of the spear was not as good as he expected. He sighed in his heart. He withdrew his spear. The bandit leader was indeed unharmed. Only his face had a deep bloody wound that revealed his bones. What a pity! Brother Li, be careful. A warning sounded. Li Yun was momentarily distracted. A torch rapidly enlarged in front of his eyes. He dodged it by a hair's breadth, but he was careless and was surrounded by the Xueqi army. Several blades were about to slash at him. The Xueqi army was not very strong, but it was difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. A few of them ganged up on one person. Li Yun's left arm was severely injured. He could not block all the knives with his right hand. Oh! He chose to protect himself. It was better to be seriously injured than to be chopped into minced meat. In the end, other than the stab on his back, the expected pain did not come. Poof, poof. The sound of arrows piercing through flesh was heard. Blood splattered on his face. Chapter 426. Is that the crossbow of the troops? Li Yun recognized the familiar buzzing sound immediately, but he realized that the direction of the arrows was wrong. Before he could think, a few more arrows pierced through the air, accurately saving a few troops who were on the brink of death. No. Are they reinforcements? Li Yun's face was filled with joy. If he could survive, who would want to seek death? After thinking about it, the silver-white spear returned to its threatening state and instantly repelled 2 enemies. He shouted loudly, "Brothers, reinforcements are here." Reinforcements? Could it be that the brother who volunteered to look for Lang Jun for help had already completed his mission? A strong desire to live ignited in his heart. His originally dispirited spirit was suddenly roused, and a strong resistance erupted. As if to confirm Li Yun's words, countless arrows buzzed and the corpses of the Xueqi army fell continuously. After 2 waves of shooting, a group of men and horses rushed out from the darkness. Wasn't the leader the people were very familiar with, Meng Hun? Endless anger brewed in their murderous cries. It was as if they wanted to take revenge and collect all the blood debts of their brothers. The Xueqi army's torches did not set the forest on fire, but they burned their own people. The raging fire burned their bodies. Painful cries mixed with murderous cries. The place was like a battlefield of Azura. People died every second. Jiang Pengji put down her crossbow, raised her hand to pull out the long sword from her waist, and rushed to the battlefield. The sword in her hand rose and fell, taking a life with each slash. In a short while, her body was stained with blood. Li Yun picked up his spear again to look for the bandit leader. Who knew that the bandit leader ran so fast, wanting to escape when he saw that the situation was not good. Where is he? He was suspicious. He used the spear in his hand to carve out a path of blood, but he did not see the strong bandit. His eyes narrowed, and he saw a familiar figure. It was as if he saw the most beautiful virgin, and his eyes lit up. He was about to rush over to snatch the head, but before he could get close, a white light flashed across the bandit's neck, and his head flew up into the sky. When he looked again, a pair of unfamiliar hands grabbed the fallen head. Li Yun was speechless. Who snatched his head? The enemy is a bandit. Whoever doesn't surrender will be killed. The skinny youth raised the head of the muscular man high up, and his hoarse voice was filled with strong unwillingness. Of course, Jiang Pengji was indignant. The troops that she had nurtured meticulously and spent a lot of money and resources to nurture were almost defeated by the Xueqi army. How could she be reconciled if she did not kill them back? However, she knew very well that if she allowed the situation to continue, it would only cause more casualties. Even though she shouted these words, the two sides who were already in a killing frenzy had no intention of stopping. Only when the Xueqi army gradually fell into a disadvantageous position, the foot of the mountain was covered with charred corpses and the strong smell of burnt meat filled their noses did they gradually regain their senses. The remnants of the Xueqi army knelt on the ground and surrendered. Some of you check the captives. The rest of you, go and extinguish the fire, lest it burns the forest. Jiang Pengji said in a hoarse voice. She casually threw the level stone aside. Her eyes revealed a ferocious glint, and no one dared to look her in the eye. I'll settle the score with the Xueqi army sooner or later. He deserves to die for injuring my subordinates. Meng Hun clenched his fists, anger brewing on his calm face. The battlefield was barely cleared until dawn. Including the troops brought by Jiang Pengji, there were only 1,800 people left. My lord! Meng Hun opened his sore eyes, as if he would cry in the next second. He could not help but feel heartache. Out of the 3,000 troops brought from Chongzhou, only 1,800 were left. Although the casualty rate was not high, every troop was the best of the best according to the standards of this world. Losing one was heartache, let alone losing nearly half of them. Are they all buried? Jiang Pengji frowned, but she did not reveal much emotion. She was used to seeing life and death. At most, she would feel sentimental for a moment, but she would not wallow in it and be unable to extricate herself. My brothers have all been buried. Meng Hun originally wanted to bring their corpses back, but the current situation did not allow for it. He could only bear the pain and bury them on the spot. Everyone had a grave. The only consolation was that their graves were all in the same place, so they should not feel lonely. Bring them back. Jiang Pengji's expression was solemn. Her gaze swept around calmly and landed on Li Yun. Seeing the state of his right hand, she raised her eyebrows and asked Meng Hun, who is this person? Why haven't I seen him before? According to Jiang Pengji's training method, the position of the thick calluses on the troops' hands was not like that. Hearing her question, one of the troops braced himself and said, Brother Li is our benefactor. Benefactor? Jiang Pengji looked at Li Yun. What's going on? At the mention of Li Yun, many people felt that they were really lucky. Li Yun was from Fengyi County. His parents died when he was young, and he learned martial arts from his mentor in the mountains near Fengyi County. Previously, when the troops were being chased by the Xueqi army, Li Yun happened to pass by. He heard about the atrocities of the Xueqi army and subconsciously sided with the troops. He enthusiastically volunteered to lead the troops and help them get rid of their pursuers. He looked cold, but in fact, he was a friendly young man. He was straightforward and not pretentious. In addition, he helped to save people several times, so he was quickly accepted by the troops and they called each other brothers. Jiang Pengji listened and calmly replied, Oh, do you have anywhere else to go? Jiang Pengji asked Li Yun. Li Yun did not react for a moment, then he said, My master asked me to go down the mountain to take a look, but he didn't specify where to go. In fact, his master's original words were that the situation in the world had changed. Only by continuously challenging people and fighting could he improve his martial arts skills. Hence, he asked him to go down the mountain to broaden his horizons.
If he returned with a scholarly reputation, he might be able to marry a good wife and carry on the Li family's ancestral line. Because Dongqing valued literature and restrained martial arts, learning martial arts was not as popular as learning literature. His master originally said that Li Yun would become a big problem. Now that the world was in chaos, it was a good time for martial artists to rise and roam the world. If you don't have a fixed goal, why not come to Xiangyang district? Now that the north of Dongqing is in a mess, it's very dangerous for you to be alone outside. Li Yun thought about it and nodded readily.
Okay.
He saw that the slender youth in front of him was very skilled. If he went to Xiangyang district, he might have a chance to spar with him in the future. Although Li Yun was smart, he had blind trust in his master. He would never forget his two goals for going down the mountain: to fight and improve his martial arts skills, to gain a scholarly reputation and get a wife. Seeing the aloof Prince Charming reveal such a naive and sweet side, the audience in the streaming room expressed their amazement. Tumi Dalao, #propping chin, the handsome Prince Charming has been lured to Xiangyang district by the streamer just like that. Doesn't he know that the streamer's boat can only be boarded and not left? You can refer to the pitiful coach Luoyue. Now he's working overtime like a dog. Buxiang jogging Zixiangxi. I seem to see the future of a delicate flower gradually withering under the pressure of working overtime. Chapter 427. Li Yun's words made Jiang Pengji's mood slightly better. Coincidentally, she caught a glimpse of the bullet screen in the streaming room. Host V, there's free high-quality labor, why wouldn't I use it? She straightforwardly admitted her little scheme. If she didn't abduct Li Yun for labor, could it be for his face? Tumi Dalao, streamer, I give you 82 points for your straightforwardness, the rest is 666 points for you. Renshin Weiku, I give the streamer's straightforwardness 101 points, one more point won't make her proud. Yinuagia Zhuge Qinma, I've never seen such a shameless person. I only admire the streamer for being thick-skinned. Shan's Haotio, compared to the streamer, even Zhou Bapi seems to have become kinder. Trinitrotoluene, all of you are talking about the streamer, then I pity the handsome Li Yun. I'm a fan of his looks. He's handsome, can fight, and has a strong contrast. There aren't many handsome guys like him in this society anymore. I should be a fan and cherish them. Li Yun was completely unaware that his looks were sought after by the audience in another world. He brandished his spear with one hand and flung away the bloodstains on the spear. His movements were elegant and clean. This dashing action mercilessly poked the cuteness of some fangirls. Jiang Pengji ignored the agitated bullet screen and leaped onto White's back. After a night's time, the troops had been assembled. Counting the number of people, there were about 1,500 members of the Tsingyi army as captives, and 2,300 people from Fengyi County were escorted out by the troops who risked their lives. Jiang Pengji gave them a choice. Whoever was willing could follow her to Xiangyang district. If they were unwilling, there was no problem. They would be given a day's worth of rations. Their life and death would be up to the heavens. Everyone had witnessed the brutality and recklessness of the Tsingyi army. Now they didn't even dare to return to their hometown, let alone walk outside. Therefore, except for a few who wanted to seek refuge with their relatives, most of the people chose to follow Jiang Pengji to Xiangyang district. No matter what, it couldn't be worse than the current situation. It wasn't far from Xiangyang district. Even if they rushed all the way, it wouldn't take more than 12 hours. Even though the Tsingyi army captives and ordinary people were somewhat of a hindrance, it would take them at most 2 or 3 days to cover the journey. As for the rations for the journey, everyone would save some. It should be able to last until they reached Xiangyang district. It was fine as long as they didn't starve to death. Jiang Pengji was calculating in her heart. From the corner of her eyes, she saw the emaciated faces of the troops and her heart softened. Let's eat something first. We'll continue our journey after you're full. The troops received the most rations, while the common people only got half. Regarding this distribution method, even if the commoners had complaints in their hearts, they did not dare to voice it out. As long as they didn't starve to death, they would be able to survive until they reached Xiangyang district. Jiang Pengji gave the troops time to eat. Almost everyone held the dry food and chewed it in big mouthfuls. They ate very fiercely. Some people's eyes reddened as they ate, their salty tears wetting their rations. Uncle, are you crying from hunger? The little girl in the red jacket widened her round eyes and used her meaty claws to wipe away the tears on his face. She thought for a moment, lowered her head, and took out half of the steamed bun that her troops had given her last night.
She handed it to him. "For you."
The steamed bun had already gone bad. The soldier raised his hand and rubbed the little girl's head.
"This is more delicious. I'm envious of it. That's why I cried. To exchange it with you."
The troop took back the rotten steamed bun and secretly stuffed the dry food in his hand to the child.
"Let's eat together."
Not only him, but almost all the brothers thought they would not live to see the next day. They did not expect that their master would personally bring people to rescue them. Calculating the distance between the two places, it was not difficult for them to imagine how fast Jiang Pengji and the others had traveled all the way. The more it was like this, the more touched they were. They wished they could die for their master.
"Okay," the little girl answered crisply. Her face was full of innocence.
"My lord, something bad has happened."
Meng Hun caught up with Jiang Pengji in a few quick steps.
He said with a serious expression, "I've asked a few brothers. They said that the Xingyi army had divided into two groups. One group chased after them to kill them, and the other group directly headed for Xiangyang district. According to their speed, I'm afraid they have reached Xiangyang district at midnight last night.
Should we hurry back to rescue them?"
Jiang Pengji closed her eyelids and said calmly, "No need.
Follow the normal speed." Meng Hun's heart tightened.
He did not understand why Jiang Pengji was not the least bit nervous or worried.
"My lord's foundation is still weak. Xiangyang district is the only place to stay."
However, Xiangyang district has experienced the earthquake and the Xingyi army's rampage.
It is still in the stage of construction. It is simply a bottomless pit.
If Xiangyang district is conquered by the Xingyi army, it is equivalent to handing over all of Jiang Pengji's assets to the Xingyi army.
Even Master Qiguan and the rest will die. Jiang Pengji understood Meng Hun's worries.
She said, "You should have more confidence in Wanjing. He was born at the border of Dongqing. He is used to such things since he was young. Frankly speaking, the Xingyi army is just a motley crew. Their numbers are like praying mantises, but the power they can exert is even weaker than praying mantises. Without a large number of siege weapons, do they still want to take Xiangyang district from Wanjing? If they really take it down, Wanjing does not need the Xingyi army to do anything. He will commit suicide out of shame."
Meng Hun was stunned. He really did not think of that. Jiang Pengji suddenly sneered.
Her eyes revealed a somewhat malicious glint. "Compared to Xiangyang district, I am actually more worried about the Xingyi army. Wanjing is an expert in the treacherous way of killing. His essence is to drive people to death. He does not care about whether his methods are light or dark.
Let him defend the city."
I also do not know how many of the Xingyi army will survive.
Xiangyang district is still lacking people. I hope not too many will die.
Meng Hun listened and was secretly speechless. Obviously, he and Qiguan Rang have been together for a few years. Why is it that his understanding of Qiguan Rang is less than half of the Lord's? Do you know why the Xingyi army was defeated so easily? Jiang Pengji said scornfully, "A group of ordinary people without armor, how can they resist other people's knives, spears and sticks? Attacking a city is not like other things. If the attacking party does not have enough siege weapons and wants to climb the enemy's wall, then they have to sacrifice their lives." Naturally, Jiang Pengji's previous night attack on Xiangyang district was purely a special case. After returning, I really have to pay attention to the development of this area. I wonder which famous Mahists are there in Dongqing. Jiang Pengji nibbled on her rations and muttered to herself. If there were, she really wanted to kidnap a few of them back. People in ancient times thought that it was just a strange and obscene technique. However, Jiang Pengji knew that technology could change the fate of a country.
Let's not talk about the distant ones.
Taking the most basic siege weapons, ladders, giant catapults, siege carts, siege towers, well ramparts, ballistae. All of these could play a huge role in a siege.
Chapter 428.
The aforementioned siege weapons had yet to be invented in this era. It could be seen how backward the entire siege technology was. If someone else said this, Meng Hun would probably say that they were distracted by playfulness, but the person who said this was Jiang Pengji, who didn't know that the improved crossbows used by the troops were invented by her. As the chief coach of the troops, No one knew better than him how much the improved crossbows added to the troops' combat power. To put it bluntly, if not for the improved crossbows, the 3,000 troops would have died many times.
The Mahists.
I haven't heard of them, Meng Hun thought carefully, but unfortunately he couldn't find any useful memories. Although it was an era of hundreds of schools of thought, due to the influence of Confucianism in the previous dynasty, Confucianism was still the leader of the 100 schools of thought and occupied a large part of the market. The Mahists were rather low-key among the 100 schools of thought. Perhaps there were many disciples of the Mahists, but most of them concealed their identities and had a low reputation. Meng Hun felt that it would be difficult to find a few outstanding Mahists in Dongqing. Forget it, it's not too late to think about it in the future. She wanted to recruit the Mahists, not because she wanted to gain anything from them. Who else in the world was more proficient than her in war machines? She just wanted to guide them in the direction of scientific experts and leave the seeds of science in the world. Ignorant and conservative thinking would not only restrict the development of the era, it would even cause the pace of the era to regress. Jiang Pengji wanted to usher in a new era, but she alone was not enough. She needed more pioneers. However, these things were too far away for her at the moment. Instead of thinking about these, she might as well think about the construction of Xiangyang district. 2 flowers bloomed, one on each side. Just as Jiang Pengji trusted, Qiguanrang did not let her down. With just 1,000 imperial guards and the 2,000 recruited soldiers, they firmly defended the Xiangyang district. The Tsing-Yi army did not have enough rations and could only hold on for 2 to 3 days. Not to mention that they could not take down the city after a long time, they successively lost more than 1,000 men. In the end, they could only helplessly choose to retreat. It was like a tortoise full of thorns. It was impossible to bite it off. Qiguanrang stood on top of the wall and looked at the retreating Tsing-Yi army regretfully. He waved his feather fan lightly and sighed. What a pity! If it wasn't for the fact that there were too few people at his disposal and the city was in ruins, he would really like to take the risk and swallow the Tsing-Yi army. When Luo Yu heard this, he thought that something was wrong, so he comforted him. Mr. Qiguan defended Xiangyang district and caused the Tsing-Yi army to lose more than 1,000 corpses. It's not easy. Qiguanrang only showed his usual smile and ordered his men to clean up the battlefield. That afternoon, the golden crow was about to set in the west. The soldiers standing guard on the Archer Tower noticed a group of people in the distance, stepping on the afterglow of the setting sun and approaching Xiangyang district. The stimulation of the past few days had made everyone tense up. They thought that this was another enemy coming to attack, so they hurriedly sent out a signal. Qiguanrang had been guarding the city for the past few days without sleep or rest. Now that he saw the signal, he could not help but perk up and climb up the city wall. He squinted his eyes and looked for a long time. Unfortunately, the distance was a little far, and he could not determine the origin of the other party in a short period of time. After a while he said, "It's nothing. Our Lord has returned." The Lord is back? When the soldiers guarding the city heard this, they almost jumped in joy. Qiguanrang opened his bloodshot eyes and said hoarsely, "Send someone to inform Feng Langjun and the others." He raised his hand to wipe his face. He had not washed his face for a few days, and there was a layer of grease on his face. Fortunately, Qiguanrang was not obsessed with cleanliness. If it was Feng Jin, he might go crazy. He asked someone to get him some water and splashed it on his face. After washing up a little, he looked more energetic. "Let's go and welcome our Lord." Qiguanrang's voice had a hint of joy in it. It was impossible not to be happy. Looking at Jiang Pengji's troops, there were at least 4,000 people. After a period of recuperation, there would be 4,000 laborers. Qiguanrang could not help but raise the corners of his lips, but a trace of doubt arose in his heart. That's not right. He seemed to have forgotten something. He had stayed up all night cultivating to be an immortal for too long. His brain was not very bright. Qiguanrang subconsciously did not think about what he had forgotten. From afar, Jiang Pengji saw the mess of Xiangyang district. The few city walls were stained with the blood of countless people. Looking at the situation, although Qiguanrang had steadily defended Xiangyang district, the pressure was obvious. "Rang respectfully welcomes our Lord." Jiang Pengji jumped off the horse and helped Qiguanrang up, who had come out of the city to welcome her. His eyes were bloodshot, and the dark circles under his eyes became more obvious. The viewers in the streaming room felt sorry for him. It was rare for Jiang Pengji to be soft-hearted. She said, "It's been hard on Wenjing to defend the city these few days. Leave the rest to me and Huayu. You should go back and rest first, lest you tire yourself out." This time, Qiguan Rang did not stubbornly say he was not tired. Not to mention anything else, he felt that he could fall asleep instantly if his head touched the pillow. Feng Jin and the rest received the news and rushed over. Seeing that Jiang Pengji had returned safely, they immediately heaved a sigh of relief. The scale of the Tsing-Yi army that attacked Xiangyang district was not large, and they were just a motley crew. They had the advantage of the city walls and the equipment to defend the city. In comparison, Jiang Pengji and the rest who went out to rescue them were in more danger. Now that they saw her return unscathed, the boulder in the hearts of Feng Jin and the others was finally lifted. Looking left and right, why did they not see Qiguan Rang? Wenjing is too tired from guarding the city these few days. I just let him go back and rest first. After Jiang Pengji finished speaking, she then turned to Feng Jin. Huayu, I'll leave the matter of how to make arrangements for the people of the Tsing-Yi army and Fengyi County who were captured. There are many young and strong men among them. I think they can be put to good use. Feng Jin knew that there would be many more households in Xiangyang district, and he immediately felt sorry for Qiguan Rang. One must know that this unlucky brother was in charge of registering the household register. The more people there were, the more work he had to do. In ancient times, there were no computers or typewriters. When Qiguan Rang re-recorded the household register, every word had to be written by hand. Not to mention him, even the few girls he borrowed from Jiang Pengji had dark circles under their eyes during this period of time. Now that there were suddenly thousands of people added to Xiangyang district, it meant an endless life of overtime. Qiguan Rang did not show any reaction on the surface, but he was probably gnashing his teeth in anger. Feng Jin secretly thought to himself, but he agreed to it verbally. Jin will definitely make arrangements for them. Jiang Pengji then said to Xueqi, with thousands of extra mouths, the food in the granary can't withstand the consumption. Recruit labor from these people as soon as possible and let them work in exchange for food. After all, we are not running a charity, the free food can't provide for a few meals. Xueqi nodded. Although the workload had increased, compared to Qiguan Rang, he could still accept it. Humans could not withstand comparison. As for the troops, when Jiang Pengji mentioned the troops, she could not help but think of the fact that nearly half of them had been lost. Thinking about it made her heart ache. Coach Meng, let the troops have a day off first. They have been running all over the place during this period of time. Everyone is tired. As for the brothers who are injured, give them time to recuperate according to the severity of their injuries. They will not join the work in Xiangyang district for the time being. Wait until their injuries are healed, then arrange tasks. Chapter 429. After arranging everything properly, Jiang Pengji heaved a sigh of relief. However, it was not the time to be completely at ease. Now that the world was in chaos, the only way to protect oneself was to strengthen oneself. She still had to prepare some city defense equipment to turn the entire Xiangyang district into an impenetrable fortress. Then, she would not have to fear the harassment of the Tsing-Yi army. The honest Li Yun noticed the tiredness on everyone's faces and asked curiously. Jiang Pengji sighed. The Xiangyang district has gone through 3 major disasters. Now, everything is being done. There is a shortage of people everywhere. The people need to be properly settled, the destroyed houses need to be rebuilt, and the wasteland outside needs to be reclaimed. Otherwise, I don't know how many people will starve to death next year. Capable people do more work. Even if I'm tired, it can't be helped. I can only use one person like 2 and try my best to do it. Li Yun was a helpful person. Otherwise, he would not have helped his troops resist the Tsing-Yi army's pursuit. Not only that, he did not realize Jiang Pengji's sinister intentions in inviting him to the Xiangyang district. Listening to Jiang Pengji's sincere words, Li Yun's heart softened. His warm and kind nature could not help but show itself. His eyes were filled with sincerity. He asked Jiang Pengji, "Is there a shortage of people here, Lang Jun? Although I am not good with brains, I have some strength. If you need my help, feel free to let me know." Finishing his words, he smiled shyly. He knew the district magistrate was not a small official. His words implied that he could not wait any longer. Feng Jin, Xueqi, and Meng Hun did not leave. They secretly looked at Li Yun as if they had seen a ghost. Which corner of the world did this simple-minded child come from? The Xiangyang district was hell on earth. They worked overtime until they wanted to die. The few of them had boarded the pirate ship and could not get off. Why did Li Yun want to harm them and seek abuse? Jiang Pengji said bluntly, "There is, but I'm afraid that a celestial being like Lang Jun is not suitable for it." Li Yun blushed and said, "You don't have to call me Lang Jun. Just call me Li Hanmei." As for the description of celestial being, it really made him feel embarrassed. Yun was a beauty. Li Yun's courtesy name, Hanmei, did not let his face down. "All right, then I won't stand on ceremony," Jiang Pengji replied readily. Under the criticism of the audience in the streaming room, she still opened her mouth. There is indeed something that needs to be done. If Hanmei doesn't mind, I'll have to trouble you with this matter. Don't worry, I'm not afraid of hardship. Li Yun was an honest child. This could be seen in all aspects. When he picked up his gun, he was an aloof Prince Charming. When he put it down, he was a naive and sweet boy who could be bullied by Jiang Pengji. In the end, Jiang Pengji left the task of reclaiming the land to Li Yun. That's right, she had sent a male god with outstanding marksmanship, who was like a killing god, to farm. De Lao Rao Ming. Hee streamer, come on, tell me your home address, I will definitely send you razors. Shanzuoshio. Oh my god, I can't imagine idly working in the fields like a farmer. Buan jogging Zixiangxi. Host, you're really good at letting a future general on the battlefield work in the fields. Why don't you just sit there and fly to the sky? Feng Jin and the others were tired. They wanted to leave, but they suddenly remembered something important and told Jiang Pengji. All right. My lord, the bricks have been produced. Brick kiln? The bricks have been produced? What's the result? Jiang Pengji held her heavy head. Hearing Feng Jin's words, her mind suddenly became clear. The craftsmen have taken out the bricks, but whether they can be used or not, my lord, you have to look first. After all, it was his lord's creation, she had the most say. Let's go to the brick kiln to take a look. Jiang Pengji gave up on the idea of resting and brought the others to the kiln. The old man who fired the pottery was now the head craftsman of the kiln. Hearing that Jiang Pengji had arrived, he hurriedly led the others out to welcome her. Since my lord left for the war, 3 batches of bricks have been fired. Now the 4th batch is being fired in the kiln. The head craftsman of the kiln led Jiang Pengji to see the first 3 batches of finished bricks. The bricks were greenish-gray in color and were neatly stacked into a pile, taking up a large area. The first batch of bricks had more cracks, but the next 2 batches had fewer cracks. They looked more orderly and beautiful. Jiang Pengji weighed the bricks in her hand, then split them open with her palm to check the lines inside. Almost there. Overall, the quality of the bricks fired in the last few batches was not bad. It was considered a success for the first firing to have such a quality. She could also see that the quality of the later batches was much better than the previous ones. It was evident that the head craftsman of the kiln took this matter seriously. After firing a batch, he tried his best to find the flaws in it and then improved it further. Continue firing. When the entire Xiangyang district starts to take shape, you will be greatly rewarded. The head craftsman of the kiln was beaming. The amount of bricks needed to rebuild Xiangyang district was not small. In order to increase the scale, Jiang Pengji specially ordered people to build 2 more kilns to fire day and night. The coal needed for firing bricks was gone. She also ordered people to purchase it from the neighboring Chengde County at a relatively low price. With the bricks, it was easier to build houses. With the addition of thousands of laborers, the construction progress was sped up. Friendship is worth 3 coins. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. A month later, Jiang Pengji took out a few brand new land deeds and house deeds and placed them in front of the few of them. When Feng Jin and the others saw it, the nerves at the corners of their mouths almost broke. There was no other reason. They were all too clear about the location of the land deeds. 3 coins. Qiguan Rang took out 3 coins from his sleeves and took one of them. Feng Jin touched his money pouch and the corner of his mouth twitched. It was either gold or silver. It was difficult to find 3 copper coins. Fortunately, Xueqi had some in stock and lent him 3 coins. Not long after, the few land deeds were divided up. The last few were almost snatched. What a joke. If they didn't snatch, the
The good spots would be taken by others. One-story buildings were popular nowadays. Houses were built very quickly. However, considering the size of the house, Jiang Pengji combined the architectural styles of Hejian County and Shangjing. With the advice and suggestions from her friends in the streaming room, everyone worked together to make full use of the space. They made an exquisite and elegant 2-sectioned and 3-sectioned house of 2 sizes. The area was not very big, but it was exquisite and elegant. It was neat and beautiful. Even Feng Jin, who was used to seeing the world, could not help but praise the small houses. The first batch of small houses was about to be completed. Jiang Pengji played a selfish trick and gave benefits to her subordinates who worked overtime until they cried. The land deeds originally belonged to the district headquarters. Jiang Pengji bought one with 1 coin and sold it to her subordinates for 3 coins. She had no choice. She was poor. She could not reward her subordinates with anything good. However, it did not matter. She had a house that was about to be completed. House and land deeds were sold at a discount of 3 coins. The viewers in the streaming room almost cried their eyes out when they saw it. Chapter 430. Heshibi Haogue. Hashtag laugh to tears. 3 coins of land and house deed. This house price is heaven. Yeo Yabakian. Heaven in my dreams. I wouldn't dare to be so bold even in my dreams. Don't casually tease. It's not only heaven, even the news broadcast wouldn't dare to put it this way. 3 coins. My dear friends, that's not even $3 in our hands. Have any of you calculated the area of that 2-level house? Even if the streamer is a wolf, tiger, leopard, and cries from working overtime, I want to cross over and hug her thighs. Author, she doesn't want jogging. Bah, what do you mean by that? The 2-level house is more than 400 square meters. This is a small house. What's my 100 square meter 2-story villa? Toilet? But this house price is ridiculous. Streamer, let me cross over and hug your thighs, okay? As long as you give me 3 coins of a 2-level house, let alone a month of overtime, even if it's a year, whoever frowns is a dog. Kizaduo, let alone a year, even if it's 10 years I'm willing. Kizaduo, I'm willing to work 10 years, let alone a year. She doesn't want jogging Xiangxi. Am I the only one who noticed that the streamer earned 2 coins? She bought the land and house deed for 1 coin and sold it for 3 coins. She earned twice as much in one go. To be honest, Jiang Pengji was a good streamer. Although she had a bad temper, she was hard-working. From waking up in the morning to sleeping at night, no matter what happened. Especially after the earthquake in Shangjing, Jiang Pengji was so tired that her daily broadcasting time increased to more than 15 hours, reaching a peak of 24 hours. Feng Jin and the rest were working overtime, but she was not idle either. However, her skin was too good. Even after staying up for 4 to 5 consecutive days, she did not have any dark circles or eye bags. The audience was quite envious at first, but then they realized that her subordinates did not believe that she was working so hard, and they immediately convulsed with laughter. It was only at such times that the unscrupulous audience would sympathize with Jiang Pengji a little. For a month, the construction of Xiangyang district was carried out in an orderly manner. From the center of the district to the surrounding areas, the first batch of exquisite houses was almost completed. When the group left, Meng Hun ran to catch up with Feng Jin and asked shyly, "Mr. Feng, can you exchange a card with me?" Feng Jin was startled. If he remembered correctly, Meng Hun had taken a 3-sectioned house, while he had a 2-sectioned house. There was a huge difference in size between the 2 houses. Wasn't it a huge loss to trade a 3-sectioned house for a 2-sectioned house? He explained, "Anyway, I'm just a loner. It's not convenient for me to live alone in a big place." Although Meng Hun was a martial artist, he was a meticulous person. He didn't react in time, but he soon realized that he had messed up. Jiang Pengji had obviously considered each person's family when she took out the deed of the house and the deed of the land. Those who were already married would be allocated a 3-way house, while those who were single would be allocated a 2-way house. Jiang Pengji acted too quickly. It seemed like she had taken away the house that originally belonged to Feng Jin. Of course, he had to change it back now to avoid any unhappiness and filth. Meng Hun scratched his head and said, "Teacher's house is still under construction, so the noise will be quite loud. I reckon it will disturb my niece and sister-in-law. I'm a man so I don't mind."
The sound of construction is not even as loud as my snoring. Feng Jin smiled and exchanged the deed to the land and house with the other party. In a month's time, Xiangyang district had turned from decadent to prosperous. As he walked out of the district headquarters, the ground beneath his feet was unusually flat. Even if a horse carriage of inferior quality drove on it, the people in the carriage wouldn't feel the slightest jolt. This was something that even Shangjing in the past couldn't achieve. This was because the bricks used to pave the road were green bricks fired in a brick kiln. The scale was different from the green bricks used to build houses. It was wider and thicker. Of course, from Feng Jin's point of view, it was really extravagant. Although the green bricks themselves weren't worth much, the rarer they were, the more valuable they were. He followed the address on the land deed and took a look at the future house. It was still outside the courtyard. He could see the neat green tiles when he lifted his head slightly. As soon as he entered the courtyard, there was a stone road paved with green bricks in the middle that led straight to the hall. The doors and windows of the hall and the wing rooms on both sides hadn't been installed yet. It looked empty. The diamond-patterned wooden window on the side corridor was slightly open. Other than the grain of the wood itself, there weren't any artificial carvings. Overall, it looked clean and refreshing. Further ahead, he entered the inner courtyard. With just a glance, he could tell that the layout of the house was the most popular nowadays. The overall building wasn't very big, but it was well lit. There was a small courtyard inside. It was bare now. If a rockery was placed, a small pond was dug, some pets could be raised, and some fish could be fished by the pond in the hot summer days. It would be extremely enjoyable and pleasant. Feng Jin walked around, thinking about how to improve it. Chongqing was almost 3 months old. If she got any older, her range of activities wouldn't be restricted to one place. This child seemed to be blessed by the heavens. From birth until now, she hadn't suffered any illnesses or disasters. One had to know that Feng Jin himself was dizzy for 2 days. He only recovered after taking some medicine. He entered the hall again. As soon as he looked up, he found something that interested him. The earthquake in Shangjing. If Jiang Pengji hadn't stood up to save Wei Jingxian and her daughter, Feng Jin would be a widower now. Every time he thought about it, he felt a lingering fear. He even had a slight fear of houses. Now that he looked up, he found the house interesting. It was very different from the houses he usually saw. Of course it was different. Although mortise and tenon were used in the buildings of this era, they were still in the early stages of development. They weren't that strong, and the technology wasn't mature. When Jiang Pengji was working on the house, she studied it with the audience in the streaming room for a long time. With their help and Jiang Pengji's own efforts, she applied the mature mortise and tenon to these new buildings. The shock-proof ability was definitely hundreds of times better than the previous jerry-built projects. Feng Jin left the house in a good mood. As soon as he went out, he saw Xueqi and Qiguanrang walking over from not far away. The 3 of them bumped into each other. When they looked again, their houses were almost on the same street. Qiguanrang still looked tired. Why don't we borrow some craftsmen from the Lord and tidy up the inner courtyard first? After Feng Jin and Xueqi worked overtime crazily, their work was back on track. During this period of time, they finally relaxed a little. Feng Jin even had time to visit his wife and child. Only Qiguanrang. He wished he could roll up his bedding and stay at his workplace. The household registration was cumbersome. The current household registration system had too many unreasonable and chaotic areas. Jiang Pengji supported him to set up a new household registration system. Although Qiguanrang was a little tempted, if he did so, it would be tantamount to going against his principle of keeping a low profile. Feng Jin said, "It's nothing. There's no need to trouble the Lord with such a small matter. I still have some servants who can tidy it up." No matter what, Feng Jin was still the Lang Jun of the Feng family. He still had a family. After looking at the house, Feng Jin went to the temporary residence. Wei Jingxian, who had recovered, was hugging her child and coaxing her. She was humming an elegant and graceful tune. Chongqing was still fair and chubby. She looked even cuter. Chapter 431. Huayu is back. Chongqing, your father is back. Wei Jingxian got up from the table. Feng Jin took the opportunity to take Chongqing, who was leaning towards him. This girl was very alert and had a good memory. The last time Feng Jin came back was 5 days ago. This child was very clingy. Feng Jin said, "I just went to see the house that my lord gave me. It's not bad. I heard the servants mention it. It said that even the road in that area is paved with green bricks. How could the people of today have seen something like green bricks? When the road was first built, there were even people who stole the green bricks on the ground in the middle of the night." Jiang Pengji was almost angry. Later, she caught a few of them and punished them severely. "It's the same in our house. It looks very clean. It's much easier for the servants to clean." Feng Jin teased Chongqing. She grabbed his finger and wanted to stuff it into her mouth. Unfortunately, she was young and did not have teeth. It did not hurt even after biting for a long time. Feng Jin only felt that his finger was itchy. "Tomorrow, get the servants to clean up the new house. First, tidy up the inner courtyard. It's really unfair for you and Chongqing to live here." Feng Jin sighed and took his finger out of his daughter's mouth. Chongqing was very unhappy. She shouted at him as if she was angry. Tsk, she was young but had a bad temper. She wanted to scratch him because of a disagreement. Wei Jingxian said with a big heart, "What's there to be upset about?" The place they lived in now was a few times smaller than the courtyard she had before she got married, but she did not feel aggrieved. The current Xiangyang district was basically a different place every day. Wei Jingxian looked at its changes and actually felt proud of it. 09 Xiao Shua Net. Her husband played a part in the development of this place. Of course she was proud. At the beginning of the reconstruction, everything was chaotic. There was almost no rules. Now that it had been a month, everyone was used to this change. The planned wide roads were also moved to the construction schedule. At present, it was beginning to take shape. Jiang Pengji, as the district magistrate, issued a few new government decrees. However, these decrees were somewhat amusing to the ordinary people. The first decree was to keep to the right when walking on the street. The second decree was not to spit or urinate anywhere. The third decree was to not go on the street shirtless regardless of whether it was winter or summer. It was a disgrace. Apart from these trivial matters, there were also some very strict laws. Illegal organizations without official permission were not allowed to buy or sell human beings. If they violated the law, they would be banished and their properties confiscated. Regardless of whether it was a man or a woman, having sex with an outsider during the term of marriage would be treated as a felony. There were dozens of them, and the number was increasing every day. At first, the people were still trembling with fear, but after a long time, they calmed down. In any case, it wasn't a tyranny. This district magistrate was doing quite well, much better than the previous one. However, there was one law that made many old people feel uncomfortable. Relatives and elders are not allowed to decide the life and death of the younger generation at will. They will be punished as murder. Jiang Pengji was criticized by many people for being a busybody. They secretly said that she was a busybody. It was purely a coincidence that this law was written. About 20 days ago, Xiangyang district was still in a state of chaos. Jiang Pengji only slept for an hour for 7 to 8 days in a row. She was so tired that she felt like she was floating. When she was patrolling outside the city, she saved a crazy young woman who was hugging a pillow and jumping into the water. She decisively went into the water and saved her. After asking for the reason, she was so angry that her mind was clear. It turned out that 3 years before the woman married into her husband's family, she gave birth to 3 daughters in a row. Strangely, all 3 daughters died before they were even a month old. At first, she thought that she was unlucky and couldn't keep her children. Later, she accidentally discovered that the children were secretly killed by her mother-in-law. The reason was also very absurd. It was because the mother-in-law didn't want a granddaughter who lost money. She spoke righteously. If it was a grandson, how could she bear to kill them? The feng shui of the scoundrel woman's belly was not good. She couldn't even give birth to a child. The woman was anxious and reported her mother-in-law. However, the district magistrate didn't convict her mother-in-law. Instead, he said that the woman was unfilial and beat her. Since then, the woman's mind was in a mess. She became crazy and told everyone she met that her mother-in-law killed her 3 granddaughters. More than 10 months ago, the husband got the widow next door pregnant and she gave birth to a boy. Her mother-in-law ordered her husband to divorce the woman and make her give up her position as the legal wife. Otherwise,
She would be demoted to a concubine. When the viewers in the streaming room heard this, they reacted fiercely. They wanted to crawl over and slap the mother-in-law to death. If the old woman was so capable, why didn't she just go to heaven? Jiang Pengji's mentality was about to explode. She went back and added 2 more. One was that adulterers would receive a heavier sentence. The other was that it was also considered murder if a relative killed someone of the same bloodline. The woman hadn't separated from the man yet. She was still the man's legal wife. If the man got the widow pregnant, it was considered rape. The mother-in-law had personally admitted to killing her 3 granddaughters. The district headquarters still had the records. It was considered murder. She didn't care about the commotion outside. She directly ordered people to arrest the strange mother and son and sentence them accordingly. Interestingly, this matter attracted the condemnation of the rotten scholars. Jiang Pengji sneered and asked them to get out of her territory. If they were thick-skinned and refused to leave, that was fine. When the house was built, they would never rent it to this family. During the farming season, the district headquarters didn't lend them oxen and farming tools. They made their whole family starve. They were so willful. If they weren't convinced, they could fight. Therefore, the rotten scholars who were prepared to scold her shut up. The construction of the entire Xiangyang district was on the right track. It changed every day. The people felt that the air was fresh, the roads were wide and tidy, and the houses were as beautiful as if they were carved out of a mold. They didn't have the right to live in the luxurious area around the district headquarters, but they could use the newly registered residents to apply to rent a new house. Every family longed for it. Even the local people who owned houses were envious. They had no choice but to be envious. The newly built houses made their old houses look even worse than the mud. In front of the houses were neat and clean green bricks. In front of their houses were mud puddles. When it rained, the difference was even greater. Although their houses weren't destroyed in the earthquake, they were dilapidated. How could they look better than the new houses? The inside and outside of the new house were neatly paved with green bricks. In such a thriving environment, there were only 2 places that were so busy that they wanted to vomit blood. One was the registration department where Qiguan Rang worked. The other was Handsome Li, who was in charge of reclaiming the wasteland. After a month, his originally wheat-colored skin had become 2 shades darker, and he looked even more resolute. He had lost some of the elegance of a pretty boy, but more of a mature man's steadiness and spirit. Of course, he also gave off the feeling of an uncle farmer. Jiang Pengji thought he would quit after a few days. She didn't expect him to be so engrossed in farming that he couldn't extricate himself. Not only that, Li Yun also showed great interest in Jiang Pengji's improved farming tools. He had the urge to change his profession and become a farmer instead of fighting wars. The well-behaved child even forgot when he had started calling Jiang Pengji Lord. Anyway, Jiang Pengji had inexplicably become his lord. Carrying a hoe, he entered the city barefooted. Li Yun was about to ask for a cup of tea in a tea house when something floated in front of his eyes. Coach Meng. Li Yun smiled, revealing a set of shining white teeth that could even reflect light under the sun. What is this? Meng Hun said, "The house, the Lord gave it to you." That day, when there was a meeting to reward the house, Li Yun was still outside the city with a group of youngsters to reclaim the wasteland and research on fertilizer. Li Yun was stunned. He asked dumbly, "House?" Meng Hun was strangely silent. He also had an honest personality, but he wasn't as naive as Li Yun. He saw how his lord bullied Li Yun. Chapter 432. Li Yun's eyes widened in shock. He almost couldn't take it all in. It's so beautiful. This is much more beautiful than the thatched hut I used to live in. It's quite tall too. I don't have to worry about hitting my head. He stood on his tiptoes, stretched out his long arms, and patted the door frame. There was a simple and honest smile on his face, and his black eyes were shining brightly. That pure smile and gaze, no matter who saw it, could not help but smile for him. Meng Hun was secretly speechless. He felt that his Lang Jun was tireless in teaching. He had dragged such a naive young man onto the pirate ship just because of a disagreement. Meng Hun crossed his arms and looked up at the door beam. "Hit my head," Li Yun said with some lingering fear. "Yes, it seems that I'm too tall. If I'm not careful, I'll hit my head."
He was the type that looked skinny when dressed but muscular when undressed. His height was even more outstanding. The house was slightly shorter, so he had to lower his head and bend over to enter. Otherwise, his head would turn red from the impact. In the past, such tragedies often happened. Every time he hit his head, not only would his head hurt for half a day, but the entire thatched hut would also shake. Meng Hun laughed involuntarily. Perhaps the Lord was concerned about your height and specially built a tall house. Meng Hun hadn't realized it. The house allocated to Li Yun was indeed much taller than other houses. Meng Hun regained his senses. He couldn't help but admire his lord's attentiveness. At the same time, he felt his heart warm. Even he thought so, not to mention Li Yun, who had a sincere heart. His impression of Jiang Pengji increased exponentially. My lord is such a good person. I never thought that one day I would be able to live in such a house. I always felt that only high officials and nobles could live in such a house. Li Yun sincerely sighed, but his words changed after that. Now that I have a house, I'll work hard to attain scholarly honors. Perhaps a girl will fall for me. Li Yun's appearance was more mature. When he didn't speak, he could fool many people. They would think that he was cold and unapproachable. In reality, his temperament was rather simple. It was as if he had been brought to live in seclusion in the mountains for many years. Meng Hun didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Han Mei is handsome and good-looking. He's also skilled in martial arts. He's well-versed in military books. He's considered brave and astute. He'll definitely be extraordinary in the future. With such conditions, which girl wouldn't blush when they saw him on the street? Why does it sound like it's difficult for you to find a wife? Li Yun replied honestly, Master said that I'm too tall and girls don't like me. It wasn't his fault that he was tall. When he was 13 or 14, he grew so fast that he didn't even dare to eat. Meng Hun was speechless. Although Li Yun was indeed a little tall, it was more manly to be more imposing and sturdy. So what if he was tall? Meng Hun saw that his expression didn't seem to be fake, so he wanted to tease him a little. He circled around Li Yun and clicked his tongue, commenting, What Han Mei said is not wrong. He is indeed too tall. One must know that most of the beautiful girls nowadays were petite and dainty. If you choose a soft and weak wife and you hug her with both hands and want to kiss her, from afar, you look like a father and daughter. Li Yun's cheeks flushed red and he felt very uncomfortable. Fortunately, he had become tanner recently, so the blush on his face was not very obvious. No, Han Mei. Don't tell me that you're still a virgin? Meng Hun saw his reaction and found it very interesting. In this day and age, to find a man over 20 who was still a virgin was more difficult than plucking the stars from the sky. Meng Hun looked at Li Yun as if he was looking at a prehistoric creature. Li Yun's words made him feel embarrassed. Master said that this is called keeping one's body clean. Meng Hun couldn't help but ask, Are you sure it's not because there are no women in the deep mountains and forests? He finally understood why his lord liked to bully Li Yun. He was indeed easy to bully. Meng Hun brought Li Yun to understand the layout of the entire house. Unlike the 3-sectioned house that needed to be renovated further, the 2-sectioned house was simpler and had everything that needed to be had. Jiang Pengji had fully considered the problems of these single dogs. She had already ordered people to build some doors and windows during the construction. If the quality of life was not high, they could just move in and stay in the 2-sectioned house. Meng Hun's wife and daughter had passed away many years ago and he had no intention of remarrying, so he did not have many requirements for the place to live. As for Li Yun, if you feel that the house is simple and crude, let the Lord know. She can borrow some craftsmen to renovate the house. Li Yun shook his head and said, This is already good enough, I don't want anything else. The area of the 2-sectioned house was not big, but considering the military's habit of training in the morning, the house specially left an empty space for training. Every morning, Li Yun could practice his spear there. After he was done, he could open the side door and go to the neighboring street to buy some breakfast to appease his hunger before going to work. I wish to apply for leave to take care of master in retirement. To take care of his master in retirement, this was Li Yun's wish. Meng Hun agreed, This is a filial act, the Lord will definitely approve my leave. The next day, Li Yun successfully applied for 3 days of leave from Jiang Pengji. 3 days of leave. Qiguan Rang used his red rabbit-like eyes to look at Li Yun with hidden bitterness. They were obviously equally busy, so why could he apply for 3 days of leave? Looking at the optimistic Li Yun leaving Xiangyang district with a small bag of food, Jiang Pengji laughed and patted his shoulder. Capable people do more work. Wenjing's work is of utmost importance. If you haven't completed the household registration after the houses in the district have been settled, the people won't be able to apply to rent a new house. Qiguan Rang snorted twice, appearing unwilling. Why doesn't the Lord transfer a few more people to Rang? It's not that I'm unwilling, but in the entire Xiangyang district, which literate person dares to show up in front of you? Jiang Pengji ridiculed him, making Qiguan Rang extremely annoyed. On the other side, Li Yun wore a coarse cloth robe, carrying a small bag and a silver-white spear on his back, walking under the scorching sun. The leave was only 3 days. He had to return before the deadline, so as to not let down the Lord's kindness to him. After walking for more than 4 hours, Li Yun's sharp ears heard the sound of rolling wheels. Lifting his head to look ahead, there was indeed a small dot on the horizon that was slowly getting closer. Little brother, do you know how far it is to reach Xiangyang district? Li Yun wanted to avoid it, but someone called out to him. He replied, if we walk, it'll take about 4 hours. The person had a sword hanging from his waist. Li Yun could feel the faint smell of blood on him. It wasn't just this guard, the dozens of people surrounding the horse carriage all had the same smell, but the intensity was different. From the looks of it, the person sitting in the carriage should be an important person. Li Yun silently pursed his lips, appearing very aloof and unapproachable. Thank you, little brother. The guard smiled kindly at him, but his gaze drifted over the spear on Li Yun's back, his eyes flashing. Master, there's still 4 hours of journey. Let's go. Chapter 433. That voice left a deep impression on Li Yun, but he was concerned about his master and did not think too much about it. Li Yun and his master had lived in seclusion in the deep mountains for many years. The place was remote and the terrain was steep, but he felt it was familiar. Even with his eyes closed, he could come and go as he pleased. Seeing the familiar pool, Li Yun's smile brightened. Master, your disciple is back. Li Yun pushed open the straw hut, his smile frozen on his face. There was no one in the hut. Dust had accumulated on the table and stove. Master. Li Yun pursed his lips. Ever since he could remember, his master had never left this mountain. But looking at the thickness of the dust, this hut had been unoccupied for a long time. Where did his master go? After thinking for a while, Li Yun pulled open the tattered curtains in the inner room and bent over to enter. He felt around under his master's mattress. There was a small pit under the mattress. His master always hid things in it. He searched with the mentality of giving it a try. His fingertips touched something hard. He took it out and saw that it was a scroll. Just like the impression his master gave others, his body was like a spear, strong as a blade. His handwriting was the same. Idiot, seeing his handwriting is like meeting you. You are grown up, you can take care of yourself. I am relieved. When you see this letter, I have already left to seek revenge. If I am alive, I will return. If I am unlucky and die at the hands of my enemy, you must not seek revenge. Xie Qian left behind a letter. Li Yun's eyes widened in disbelief. He read the letter over and over again. In the end, he helplessly believed that his master had really gone to seek revenge. But he had followed his master for so many years, but he had never heard of his master having any enemies. Would it be dangerous to seek revenge? Would the enemy be very strong? Li Yun's mind was in a mess, as if he had lost his mind. After a while, he got up and used a wooden basin to fetch water from the pool. He tidied up the hut. After a night, he found a brush and added his whereabouts on the bamboo scroll before putting it back in its original place. If his master returned safe and sound, he would definitely follow the clues and find him. Carefully closing the door of the straw hut, Li Yun left with a lonely face. Just as Li Yun entered the mountains to seek his master, Xiangyang district welcomed an unexpected guest. Stepping on the afterglow of the setting sun, a team of more than 50 people approached the West City Gate. Nowadays, Xiangyang district is heavily guarded. Entering and exiting the city requires strict checks. Just as the guard was about to step forward and question him, a wooden token flew towards him. The guard caught it with a confused look on his face. Find someone sensible. The person in the carriage is not someone you can casually inspect. The soldier was instantly enraged. Who was it? Who dared to put on airs in Xiangyang district? Just as he was about to lose his temper, the soldier beside him pulled him back and gave him a look, asking him to look at the clan emblem on the carriage. Clan emblem? The soldier looked down at the wooden sign and then at the low-key and simple carriage behind the crowd. Both of them had patterns in the shape of willow leaves. It looked like a few willow leaves, but in fact, it was the word Lu. But why does this pattern look so familiar? What are you waiting for? Isn't that the emblem of Magistrate Lu? His companion reminded him in a low voice. The soldier was so frightened that he almost dropped the wooden token. He walked forward with trepidation and asked in a low voice, "Is the noble person in the carriage a relative of Magistrate Lu?" The higher-ups didn't instruct anyone from the Lu family to come over recently. The guard felt wronged and was afraid of losing his job. The person smiled and said, "The noble person in the carriage is indeed a relative of Magistrate Lu. Go and report quickly to prevent any delays." The soldier was completely stunned and hurriedly handed the wooden token back. "Please wait for a moment, noble person. I'll go and report now." Even so, the soldier was still cautious and did not report directly to the magistrate. Instead, he looked for Feng Jin nearby. "Did you say that the lord's relative is here?" Feng Jin frowned. The lord's relatives were mostly in Hejian. Lu Shi was also far away in Chongzhou. How could he come to Xiangyang district? No matter what, he had to go and take a look personally. Then he would know whether it was true or not. Lead the way. With that, Feng Jin walked towards the city gate. Once he saw the carriage, he was already 80% convinced. At this moment, the curtain of the carriage was lifted from the inside, revealing half a familiar face. Feng Jin almost lost his composure. Why did Lu Shi come to Xiangyang district from the borderlands of Chongzhou? "Why you don't make a fuss." Lu Shi's hoarse voice contained a strong sense of fatigue. "Let's enter the city." Because Li Yun was on leave, there was no one to manage the farm matters. Jiang Pengji decided to do it herself. She wore a pair of straw sandals on her feet and a pair of wooden clogs in her hands. Leisurely, she sauntered back to the city. Her trousers were rolled up above her knees. Her originally fair and slender legs were covered in mud. Her long hair was casually tied up with a hemp rope. On the way back, she rubbed her slightly hungry stomach and took out a few coins to buy 2 steamed buns. She held one in each hand and the other in her mouth. If there was no reminder, no one would have guessed that she was the magistrate of Xiangyang district. As a result, Lu Shi saw his daughter's sloppy behavior. Seeing Lu Shi, Jiang Pengji was so shocked that she forgot to bite the steamed bun. The audience in the streaming room and their fellow streamers were stunned. Feng Jin and the others sat quietly in the hall. The seat that originally belonged to her was occupied by a charming middle-aged man. Age did not make Lu Shi look old. The white hair on his temples only made him look more mature. Time favored this man and made him look more charming than before. However, this was not the main point. The main point was, why was Lu Shi here? Without an imperial edict, the magistrate of a district could not leave his territory. Jiang Pengji held the steamed bun in her mouth and called out vaguely, "Father." Lu Shi looked at Jiang Pengji, who was dressed like a boorish youth. His already uncomfortable head felt even more uncomfortable. He felt that he had raised a fake daughter. "Father, why are you in Xiangyang district? The world is so chaotic now." Jiang Pengji swallowed the steamed bun in 2 or 3 bites. Just as she was about to step into the hall, she looked at the clean floor and then at her muddy legs. She quietly shrank back. "I'll clean up now. Father, please wait." "Why you? Take care of them first." Jiang Pengji washed off the mud on her legs, put down her trousers, put on her wooden clogs, and walked steadily to meet Lu Shi. Her disguise would undoubtedly cause the audience to ridicule her. "Jintian Wuging O, trash streamer, your father has seen your most boorish side. What's the use of pretending to be steady now?" The expressions of the streamer's father and the streamer were too funny. It felt like a father suddenly inspecting his son and happened to catch him watching a certain type of film. You guessed true or fake. My heart aches for the streamer's father. He must suspect that he raised a fake daughter. Jiang Pengji ignored the disturbing bullet screen in the streaming room and bowed respectfully to Lu Shi.
Lu Shi sized her up from head to toe. Chapter 434. Zhang Pengji could not help but feel sad. A father was indeed the best. He knew how to love his daughter. She had told Qiguan Rang that she had not slept for a long time, but he looked at her with a "don't lie" expression. I am unfilial. I made you come all the way from Chongzhou. The world is not stable. The journey is dangerous. If you miss me, you can just send a letter. Why take such a big risk and come here personally? If something happens on the way, I will feel guilty for the rest of my life. Zhang Pengji said with concern. The journey was so dangerous, but Lu Shi dared to run around. Lu Shi laughed and said, I can't feel at ease without seeing you with my own eyes. The earthquake happened too suddenly. Even though Lu Shi was far away in Chongzhou, he felt the tremors. He could not imagine what happened to his daughter, who was at the center of the earthquake. Now that I have seen you, I can sleep well tonight, Lu Shi said gently. Luo Yue secretly glanced at Lu Shi. He was a man as gentle as jade. He had an indescribably noble demeanor. He then looked at Zhang Pengji. His mind was filled with all kinds of cruel behaviors. She was either killing or preparing to kill. These two people with such different styles were actually father and son? Zhang Pengji said softly, I feel guilty. I have made you worry. Lu Shi raised his hand and rubbed his daughter's head to comfort her. He especially liked this action. Lu Zhongqing, you are not allowed to touch His Majesty's noble head. What if you become stupid? The girl's mischievous laughter seemed to have happened yesterday. It became the most vivid memory in his mind. Zhongqing, don't be too fierce. Be gentle to her. My Majesty is actually a sharp-tongued but soft-hearted person. He's the best person in the world. Zhongqing, you have to promise me that you won't mistreat her in the future. Treat her well and love her well. This is for her own good. I want you and her to live well. Even if I'm not around, both of you should live well. Let me see a different history, okay? When no one was around, Lu Shi would ponder over Gu Min's words before she died. Had she returned to her own world? Was she living a more carefree and unrestrained life than before? Lu Shi closed his eyes to hide his thoughts. The longing was like a net binding him, making the hatred brewing in his heart thicker. Lu Shi only wanted peace of mind. Seeing that Zhang Pengji was safe and sound, he planned to rest for 2 days before returning to Chongzhou. Feng Jin and the others tactfully took over Zhang Pengji's tasks and gave her free time to chat with her father, fulfilling her filial piety. It was also at this time that Li Yun returned early. There was no one else by his side. Meng Han asked him, Han Mei, your master didn't come over? Li Yun said dejectedly, Master left a letter, saying that he went to seek revenge on his enemy. It's just that I've followed my master for so many years, but I've never heard him mention any enemies. Now that he suddenly says he's going to take revenge, it really makes me anxious. However, Master is highly skilled in martial arts, so there won't be any problems when he travels outside. Meng Han secretly curled his lips. He had reservations about these words. To be able to raise such a pure and untainted child like Li Yun, that master was probably not that complicated. Nowadays the world is so chaotic. If you don't be careful when you go out, you won't even have your underwear left when you go home. Li Yun went to the district headquarters to look for Zhang Pengji to cancel his leave and return to work early. As soon as he entered, he saw his lord eating with a middle-aged man. My lord, I've returned from my leave. Lu Shi raised his head. His eyes gradually widened as he cried out involuntarily, Xiaohe? Zhang Pengji and Li Yun both revealed a baffled expression. The latter even turned his head to look behind him. There was no one. Was he calling for him? After Lu Shi blurted out, he immediately realized that he had misunderstood. The person in front of him was too young, and his build was too tall. He didn't match the person in his memory. He gestured for Li Yun to come closer. With a complicated expression he asked, What's your name? Li Yun glanced at Zhang Pengji, his eyes seeking her opinion. Zhang Pengji replied, Han Mei, this is my father. You can call him Old Master. Lu Shi's expression became somewhat conflicted. Han Mei? Is that your courtesy name? This courtesy name really matched this person's face. It indeed seemed like a name that person would choose. One look and you could tell that it wasn't proper. In response to Old Master's question,
My name is Li Yun. If you don't mind, you can also call me Han Mei. Li Yun? Your surname is Li, not Xie? Lu Shi raised his eyebrows and asked, Then do you have a man with the surname Xie? My master's surname is Xie. Li Yun didn't know what was going on, so he answered honestly. Old master, do you know my master? You call him master? Lu Shi was amused. His smile was sarcastic. Where is he hiding now? Li Yun was confused. If he didn't call his master master, then what should he call him? Not only that, but the old master in front of him seemed to know his master. His words sounded familiar. My master went out to travel a few days ago. He said he was looking for an enemy to take revenge and told me not to worry about him. If he's still alive, he'll definitely come back to look for me. If he's unfortunately dead, there's no need to take revenge for him. After saying this, Li Yun looked at Li Yun, who was a little dispirited, like a little rooster who had lost a battle. Lu Shi snorted. He said harshly, He's going to seek revenge? TSK, then you don't have to wait. This person probably won't even have his bones left. Li Yun was furious. Even if the person in front of him was his lord's father and an old friend who knew his master, he was still angry. Do you know who your master is going to seek revenge on? Lu Shi was not afraid of the anger in Li Yun's eyes. The corners of his mouth curled into a mocking smile. He said to himself, barging into the Zhongzhou palace means death no matter what. No matter how capable Xie Shaohe is, no matter how good his spear techniques are, he's still courting death. His words not only shocked Li Yun, but Zhang Pengji's eyes widened. She stared at Li Yun's face. Li Yun clenched his teeth. My master's enemy is hiding in the Zhongzhou palace? Something like that. Lu Shi took a sip of tea and looked at Li Yun with a complicated expression. I think your master doesn't want you to know the truth. If that's the case, I won't be the bad guy. Young man, work hard with Lanting. Your future is bright. Lu Shi secretly smacked his lips. As one of the 10 great generals of the Zhang dynasty, how could his future not be bright? However, he never thought that Li Yun was the son of Xie Qian and that woman. It was a sin that could not be settled. Li Yun's mind was a mess. After hesitating for a while, he asked Lu Shi, Are you familiar with my master? Lu Shi sighed. Xie Shaohe and my late wife were childhood friends. We can be considered familiar. The people who were once alive and well were now scattered like the wind and clouds. It was a sad sight. By the way, how old are you this year? Are you married? Lu Shi asked. Chapter 435. Lu Shi murmured. 20? That doesn't seem right. He didn't doubt that Li Yun was Xie Qian's son. Apart from his mother's facial features, Li Yun looked exactly like Xie Qian when he was young. Otherwise, he wouldn't have mistaken him for Xie Qian. Thinking of Li Yun's surname, he felt that his age was most likely fake. Xie Qian had purposely said he was 2 years older. Li Yun left with a stomach full of questions. Zhang Pengji, who hadn't spoken for a long time, asked Lu Shi, Is there something wrong with Han Mei's background? Xie Qian's son. That face is the best proof. Lu Shi took a deep breath and said, More than 10 years ago, this name was synonymous with young and romantic. He was the dream lover of many noble ladies. I didn't expect him to hide in Fengyi County with his son for so many years. He didn't even send a message home. I think he must have suffered all these years. Now that Li Yun is under your command, I can only say that fate makes fools of people. Zhang Pengji frowned and said, Father, are you referring to Xie Qian? If that was the case, wouldn't Li Yun be that woman's son? Who else could it be? Lu Shi sneered. Then when Xie Qian went to the Zhongzhou palace to seek revenge, wouldn't he be killing his wife? Lu Shi said disdainfully, What kind of wife is she? She's just a demon who took over Xie Qian's wife's body. To Xie Qian, his beloved wife Wang Huiyun, who was known as the twin beauties of Langya, had died in childbirth long ago. The one who survived was nothing more than a venomous scorpion woman who was born to be arrogant, ruthless, and arrogant. What did that feel like? Wang Huiyun used to be the goddess of many young men. But not many people knew that their goddess body had been taken over by a ghost of unknown origin. She turned from pure and kind to wicked and wicked. Lu Shi sympathized with Xie Qian. If Wang Huiyun had died in childbirth, it would have been the end of it. But her body had been taken over by someone, and that person had used her body to pester all kinds of men. Not to mention seeing it with his own eyes. Even thinking about it was disgusting. Jiang Pengji frowned. It was rare for Lu Shi to mention the past. She asked, "You took over Xie Qian's wife's body?" "Yes." Lu Shi nodded. Xie Qian and Wang Huiyun were childhood sweethearts. Many people's hearts were broken when they got married. A year later, she gave birth to a son. I believe that child was Li Yun. However, ever since Wang Huiyun gave birth, Xie Qian's behavior had become strange. He's anxious and cold to his wife. He goes to Buddhist temples and Taoist temples all day long, but in front of others, he pretends that nothing has happened. Jiang Pengji's father's words. She was to. She was to be. The information contained in the words of the host's father was a little too much. And then, Jiang Pengji asked, "Shi Lu. Shi. Lu. Shi Lu." She said. She speaking of this, Lu Shi sneered. His eyes, which used to be as gentle as water, were now as cold as a lake, which made people shiver. However, things are unpredictable. On their way to Hejian County, they ran into bandits. Xie Qian risked his life to protect his wife. Unfortunately, he and his son were killed. But Xie Qian and Hanmei are still alive. So Wang Huiyun is lying. Lu Shi's face was gloomy. What bandits? Wasn't she the one who arranged them? She did it to get rid of Xie Qian. Xie Qian noticed something was wrong with her and wanted Master Liaochen to get rid of her. How could she not be afraid of a ghost of unknown origin? The atmosphere in the streaming room grew tense as Lu Shi's narration went on. All channel recommendation Weibulai. Am I the only one who has goosebumps? Lao Ciji Lianming. I thought about it. Xie Qian's wife was transmigrated when she was giving birth. Xie Qian found out, and the transmigrator killed Xie Qian and his father. Of course, Li Yun and his master are still alive. The transmigrator is suspected to have killed the host's mother. She has a deep grudge against the host's father. That's awesome, my transmigrator. Ha ha ha, you have a wild imagination, but it's very interesting. What's going on? In Yueja Zhuga Qinma. #propping chin. I think that's the right way to transmigrate. The ancients weren't idiots. Wouldn't they be suspicious if their loved ones changed? Xie Qian felt that there was nothing wrong with finding an expert to get rid of a ghost that had taken over his wife's body. But the transmigrator was also quite something. She made a beautiful comeback and was ruthless. I don't know if she'll threaten the host. Siscon Zaya. Are you kidding me? Who can kill our host? The weeds on the grave of the last person who said this are now as tall as a person. But then again, the host really needs to be careful. This transmigrator is obviously not easy to deal with. I always feel that this transmigrator has a sense of superiority. Maybe she's read too many brainless transmigration novels? Yu Yu Heshibi. This is a world that has definitely been penetrated into a sieve. Listen to my analysis. The transmigrator is a harem beauty, the host's mother is a sweet farmer, and the host is a despicable fighter. Looking at it this way, the host seems like a traitor. As a transmigrator, she doesn't look for someone to fall in love with, but instead snatches a job for men. You're awesome. Jiagang Wan Fuzo. You guys don't understand. The host's skill is the real deal. When you become an emperor, you can sleep with all the men in the world. That's the integrity a transmigrator should have. If you want to have sex, you should have sex. What's the use of fighting over a man with a few women? Who knows how many cucumbers have been used? If you have the ability to make all the men in the world fight for you, all the men will fight for you, and all the men will fight for you just to look at you. What are 3,000 handsome men to you? When he said that, he suddenly felt that the usually frivolous host's figure had suddenly grown a few notches taller. What does she want by doing this? Jiang Pengji didn't understand. Oh, who knows? Lu Shi was disdainful. But she's very ambitious. Be careful. Lanting. Jiang Pengji nodded. Even if Lu Shi didn't say anything, she was always on guard. After ending the unpleasant topic, Lu Shi suddenly thought of something. Oh right. Lu Shi said. There was a child marriage. Jiang Pengji was stunned. What?
Isn't your mother and Xueqi childhood friends? They used to joke that the two families would become in-laws. Lu Shi looked at Zhang Pengji helplessly. Lanting, you're already 16 this year. Don't you think about that? I think Li Yun is a little simple-minded. But Xueqi's son can't be too bad. He's also quite good-looking. If you like him, you can take him. Chapter 436. The next day. Lu Shi and Zhang Pengji changed into ordinary people's clothes and walked around Xiangyang district. Looking at the thriving district, Lu Shi sighed in his heart. His Majesty's methods were indeed extraordinary. Father, are you tired? Do you want to rest in a tea house? Zhang Pengji brought Lu Shi to see Xiangyang district. Although Xiangyang district was not very prosperous at the moment, according to her plan, it would be reborn in a few months' time. Even Shangjing City could not compare to it. Zhang Pengji took the opportunity to talk with Lu Shi about governance. Her father had a deep understanding of governance. He was almost omniscient. He could point out many of her doubts. Zhang Pengji used to be the commander of the army, but the commander and the district magistrate were two different concepts. In terms of governance, even if Zhang Pengji had knowledge that surpassed the times, she still had to learn a lot. Good. When I retire one day, I'll come to your place and buy a house so that I can retire in peace. Zhang Pengji said, if you want to buy a house, you don't have to pay for it yourself. I have lots of land deeds. She could buy as many as she wanted for a penny. The first batch of houses were given to her subordinates, and the remaining 50 or so were hers. The second and third batches were ready to start construction. Zhang Pengji did not lack land deeds and house deeds. Lu Shi was speechless. Fortunately, the world is in chaos. Otherwise, you will be impeached. He did not need to think to know what his daughter had done. The land deeds she mentioned were not from a legitimate source. She was the district magistrate, and she had the final say in all the internal affairs of the district headquarters. 09 Xiao Chuanet. If she wanted to buy back the land deeds with a penny, who could say no? Lu Shi stepped on the flat bricks, and his wooden clogs made a rhythmic clacking sound. It was crisp and pleasant to the ears. I noticed that the people here are well-mannered, Lu Shi said. There is no filth on either side of the street. You will be fined for littering, and the fine will be double the previous one. There are trash cans on either side of the road, and you can throw it away if you walk a few steps. If you don't lack money, you can throw it away. As long as you have enough property to compensate the district headquarters, I don't mind. Even if Zhang Pengji didn't issue such a decree, the phenomenon of people randomly throwing rubbish or spitting had decreased. The entire road was paved with green bricks. When had they ever seen such a smooth and clean road in their lives? If there was an eyesore, how uncomfortable it would be to look at it. Most of the places in Xiangyang district were under construction. A few areas had been cleaned up. Under Zhang Pengji's encouragement, many people opened street stalls, which brought some prosperity to the county town. There was no good tea in the tea house, so she ordered 2 big bowls of tea. The color was a little muddy, but the smell was not bad. Although it's your first time governing, you're doing much better than me. This was probably the talent that Amin was talking about. Lu Shi shook his head secretly. When he was in charge of Hu County in the past few years, he had worn himself thin and weak. Hu County barely had a flourishing scene. It had only been a month since Xiangyang district had emerged from the dark clouds of the earthquake. The people who came and went had smiles on their faces. He was deeply moved when he saw it. He did not know if it was because he was too weak, or because His Majesty was too powerful. Zhang Pengji said, like father like son. Lu Shi knew that the words were meant to make him happy, but he could not help but feel proud. He said, that's true. It's a family tradition. The father and son were narcissistic and praised each other in disguise. After drinking tea and putting down 2 coins, Zhang Pengji brought Lu Shi to the brick kiln. Father, I'll take you to see something. She ordered people to encircle the area of the brick kiln. Entry and exit had to be strictly checked. According to Zhang Pengji's plan, green bricks would become the specialty of Xiangyang district in the future, so technical protection was very important. They entered the brick kiln with their personal seal. The closer they got, the hotter the surrounding temperature became. It was a hot summer day. Soon, Lu Shi's forehead was sweating. What are you looking at? Lucy was curious. Knowing that Jiang Pengji had arrived, the craftsman of the brick kiln quickly came out to welcome her. She waved her hand to indicate that there was no need for formalities. How are the things I asked you to make a while ago? Jiang Pengji asked the craftsman of the brick kiln as she walked. I've made 6 batches. Most of the semi-finished products are not ideal. I've only managed to make 3 sets. The old man showed a pained expression. I've destroyed the defective products according to my lord's request. The leftovers will be guarded by someone specially to ensure that no secrets will be leaked. 3 sets? It's better than expected. Jiang Pengji thought about it and said, take 1 set out for the old master to see. All right. Please wait a moment, my lord. Hearing this, the craftsman of the brick kiln heaved a long sigh of relief and wiped the sweat off his face. There were many benefits to helping the lord. Some time ago, the lord was very generous and rewarded him with a land deed. According to the plan, it should be the 2nd batch of houses to be completed. Now, the whole family was eagerly waiting for the first batch of houses to be completed and the 2nd batch to be built. Just based on the appearance of the first batch of houses, how many people were envious of their great luck? With many years of experience in making pottery, they had won the Lord's favor. Now, the whole family was living a good life. The craftsman of the brick kiln carefully took out a long box and opened it carefully. The audience in the streaming room thought it was a rare treasure. They didn't expect to see a glass tea set lying inside. I love you. 666, the streamer really made glass. Lao Ciji Lianming. It's indeed glass. Although the purity isn't very high, it's very exquisite. According to the usual plot of novels, this thing was worth a lot of money. The key was that the cost was low. A set of glass could be sold for hundreds of thousands of strings of coins. I'm asking you if you're afraid of this profit. 1,000 strings of coins was equivalent to 1 tael of silver. What kind of concept was hundreds of thousands of strings of coins? Even robbing a bank wasn't that domineering. Little angel. #propping my chin. I'm curious who the streamer wants to trick with this glass. Shanzushu. It must be someone with a lot of money. If it's not the tycoon of Dongqing, then it's the idiot of the north borderline. Naturally, people today had never seen glass, not to mention that the glass was indeed beautiful. It was exquisite and beautiful. This thing. How much does it cost? Lu Shi's eyes were filled with amazement. He was a little obsessed, but he quickly returned to normal. It's very low. Jiang Pengji didn't specify the exact amount. She just used her thumb to point at the brick kiln behind her. She smiled and said, when the bricks are baked, they're also baked. Father, look at it. How much do you think it's worth? Lu Shi pondered and said, priceless. You want to show me this thing to show your filial piety? Of course. But isn't Xiangyang district too poor? Now we don't even have enough food. I wonder if father can help me? Jiang Pengji smiled and took out a round bowl that was a few times smaller than a woman's palm. She held it with 2 fingers and it looked very beautiful under the light. I heard that in the north borderline, the rich are very rich. They raise horses and cattle in herds. They spend a lot of money without frowning. In order to show their noble status, they like to collect rare treasures. Is this true? Lu Shi understood her intention. It turned out that she wanted him to help her sell it. He asked, that's true, but they won't be interested in ordinary objects. As for this, there's no doubt that it will definitely be sought after by the nobles of the north borderline. How does Lanting plan to price it? How about 150,000 strings of coins? Lu Shi was so shocked that he almost dropped the glass cup. 150,000 strings of coins? Even robbing a bank wouldn't make such a huge profit. Daughter, are you sure you didn't add an extra 0? If you can't exchange it with gold and silver, I don't mind using horses or cattle or sheep of equivalent value. Fur is fine too. Jiang Pengji said calmly. She didn't look like she was the one who had just opened her mouth like a whale. Chapter 437. Bow to the despotic tyrant. 150,000 strings of coins. Are you sure the streamer didn't say 10,000? Eli Chengda. Can anyone explain how much 150,000 strings of coins is? 10 fingers are not enough. So Tianyan. He.
Not to mention 10 fingers, even if you count the hands and feet of your whole family, you still won't be able to calculate it.
Zhenshi Liugang. Let's put it this way.
Different dynasties have different exchange rates between copper coins, silver coins, and gold.
It fluctuates like foreign exchange.
You won't understand even if I explain it in detail. To put it simply, 1 coin is equivalent to 1,000 coins. 1 coin is equivalent to $1 here, so 150,000 strings of coins.
Can you guess how much money it is?
Traveling to ancient times with a glass vase at home and becoming a billionaire in an instant. Are you afraid of such a huge profit? Selling a set of glass products for 150 million. Streamer, you're not just black-hearted, you're black-hearted from head to toe. Jiang Pengji looked at their comments and added helplessly. Host V. I'm not that black-hearted. Converting it to here, it's at most 70 to 80 million. Everyone. Dashan Motsi. This is the first time I know that it's not black-hearted to set a price of 7 or 8 yuan at 70 to 80 million. Slimming failure. Streamer, you're great. Lu Shi steadied his heart to avoid being scared to death by his daughter. He looked at the glass tea set with a conflicted expression. After a while he said, if there's only one set in the world, it's not impossible to sell it for 150,000 strings of coins. Jiang Pengji raised her eyebrows and said, it's definitely impossible to sell one set. That's why the price is set too high. Small profits but quick turnover can benefit more nobles in the northern borderline. The price should be set at a level that they can accept, but they don't think it's cheap. Lu Shi pondered for a while and his gaze turned to the glass tea set a few times. I think 5 to 20 strings of coins should be enough. We need to make a few more types of these things, and the price can be increased or decreased according to the purity. If we want the sales to be good, we have to plan carefully and promote their origins. After hearing Jiang Pengji's whopping price of 150,000 strings of coins, the audience felt that the streamer's father was very kind.
Xianggu is the cutest. Have my values been corrupted? Why do I feel that glassware is cheap?
To me Dalao. To the one above, you are not alone. Don't hu shua badeo. To the previous poster, there are more than 2 of you. Jiang Pengji frowned as she looked at the rows of complaints.
Isn't this price too low?
Lu Shi said, that's a good price. If you want a good horse, you'll have to lower the price. The northern borderline was vast and rich in high-quality horses. They also kept a close eye on the various horse farms. However, there would always be people who would take risks for the sake of profit. The horse that Lu Shi gave to Jiang Pengji was smuggled out. It was originally meant to be presented to the king of the northern borderline, but the officials under him intercepted it and sold it. The horse that they gave to the king was slightly inferior. How could Lu Shi not know about this? Lanting, Min often says that doing business is like fighting a war or ruling a country. There are many ways to do it. Once you master the rules, you can play with the entire market.
Lu Shi smiled.
His wife was an expert in business. She was the one who had built up the businesses of the second branch of the Lu family. He had been with her for many years and had learned a little.
Leave this matter to me.
You just have to wait for the money to come in. Jiang Pengji naturally believed in Lu Shi. Then I will control the number of kills and strive for excellence. Lu Shi nodded and added, the rarer something is, the greater its value. No matter how good something is, once there are too many of them, it won't be considered good anymore. I will stay here for a few more days to make a few sets of good quality and bring them back. From then on, don't make this thing in the kiln for the time being. Keep a close eye on the people under you. If anyone secretly makes it or spreads the skill, kill them. Don't be soft-hearted.
I know.
I have people who know how to make it.
I know who leaked the secret.
Jiang Pengji had a gentle smile on her face. The craftsman of the kiln could not help but feel his scalp go numb when he heard it. The old man had experienced things like learning a skill, secretly opening a kiln to make it, and then smuggling and selling it for profit when he was young. After all, it was a business with no capital. Who would not do such a good thing? He was not afraid of not having profits, but he was afraid of not having the guts. When he heard the conversation between the father and son, even he could not help but tremble. That was a few strings of coins. Who would not be tempted? However, what she said next made him shrink his neck. No matter how much money he had to be alive to spend it.
Do a good job.
When we make a lot of money, We won't forget your contributions. Jiang Pengji raised her hand and patted the shoulders of the craftsman. If you do a good job, I will remove your grandchildren's status as craftsmen. In the future, when the county opens a school, give them a free place to study. The current household registration system was a pain in the ass. The children of craftsmen could only be registered as craftsmen. In terms of social status, although they were slightly higher than slaves, they were still lower than ordinary people. It was impossible for a craftsman to remove their status as craftsmen without some miraculous encounters. Not to mention that the Lord had promised to give their children the opportunity to study. In this era, it was not easy to study, no matter how rich the family was. The source of books was a big problem. How could they study without textbooks? Jiang Pengji was born into an aristocratic family. Naturally, the craftsman did not doubt her. The craftsman's eyes lit up. He said in a loud voice, "Rest assured, my lord. I will not let you down." For the sake of the bright future of his descendants, for the sake of them becoming superior people, the craftsman of the brick kiln wished he could live here directly, keeping his eyes wide open to supervise everyone, managing every step well, and personally destroying all the glass waste. That's good. Jiang Pengji asked the craftsman to take out the 3 sets of glass tea sets. The best set would be given to Lu Shi. One would be used by herself, and the other would be kept in the government office of the county. The next day, Qiguan Rang came to work with sleepy eyes. When he opened the door, a strong golden light shone into the hall. The reflection made his eyes blur. What the hell was that? He squinted his eyes and found a set of exquisite, colorful objects on the table inside. All of a sudden, all the sleepy bugs flew away. Qiguan Rang was so scared that he quickly retreated to the door. He looked around and murmured, "Could it be that I'm not awake yet?" Qiguan Rang did not believe it. He took small steps toward the table. The beautiful objects had not disappeared. He carefully reached out his hand and touched it. A cold sensation came from his fingertips. They did not turn into bubbles? It's not a dream? His breathing became heavier. He stared at them with a serious expression. "What's wrong, Wenzheng?" After a while, Feng Jin came in with a large pile of dusty bamboo slips. Qiguan Rang was already inside. Chapter 438. Wenzheng. The bamboo slips that Feng Jin was carrying were piled high, blocking his view. When he didn't hear Qiguan Rang's response, he called again. "Ah!" Qiguan Rang then reacted and stood up to help Feng Jin carry some of the bamboo slips. "When did you come, Huayu?" "I just came a while ago. I saw you sitting there in a daze. I thought you closed your eyes and fell asleep." Feng Jin carried the large pile of bamboo slips to the short table behind the screen in the government office. He sorted them according to the contents of the strips of cloth stuck on each bamboo slip. The work was a little tedious and needed to be careful. This small room was full of such bamboo slips, which recorded the case files of Xiangyang district in recent years. The content was vast and complicated. Although Xiangyang district was not big, there were many messy matters. In order to restore the work system of the entire district headquarters as soon as possible, Feng Jin began to work overtime again. He was just not as crazy as he was at the beginning. He desperately hoped that his lord would quickly start to recruit talents and get more people to help him share the workload. Today's government office was obviously more females than males. The girls from before had all become external staff. Fortunately, they had these well-educated and well-mannered maidens. Otherwise, the few of them would be exhausted to death. In order to make it convenient for these girls to work, his lord specially opened up another government office. It wouldn't be too awkward to meet them occasionally. Feng Jin tidied up for a while and realized that there was no movement outside. He was suspicious. Wenzheng? What was wrong with Qiguan Rang today? If it was in the past, even if he didn't want to speak, there wouldn't be such an awkward silence. Feng Jin was puzzled. He took out the bamboo slips that he didn't finish yesterday and planned to finish them in one go today. "What are you looking at?" At this time, Feng Jin realized that Qiguan Rang wasn't asleep sitting down. His mind was obviously taken away by something. "Wenzheng, what are you looking at? You're so fascinated." "This thing." Feng Jin stopped nagging and his starry eyes widened. Suddenly, his hands loosened, and the bamboo slips in his arms fell to the ground. With a burst of crackling sounds, Feng Jin's toes were hit by the scattered bamboo slips, almost causing him to grimace in pain. How could Qiguan Rang be distracted when he heard the commotion? The two of them looked at each other, then tacitly shifted their gazes to the table. Feng Jin stopped tidying up the bamboo slips and hurriedly sat at the table. He secretly moved his toes. It hurt so much. He looked at the tea set on the table. What is this thing that emits colorful glazed light? Qiguan Rang was also puzzled. Does Huayu not recognize this thing? It can't be that serious, right? Feng Jin was born in the Feng family, which was one of the 4 noble families in Dongqing. His family had thousands of years of heritage. What did they not have in their family? Feng Jin had grown up in such a family. What had he not seen in this world? Qiguan Rang did not believe that Feng Jin had never seen this object before. In all honesty, Feng Jin had never seen this thing before. It looks like a tea set. Could it be a product of the northern borderline? Feng Jin picked up a small and delicate transparent bowl and carefully played with it. It was smooth and cold. It was summer and the weather was hot. There was no ice in the government office to cool down, so it was very hot. When Feng Jin touched the delicate teacup, his fingertips felt an indescribable coolness. It was cold and delicate, which made him love it so much that he couldn't put it down. The northern borderline. I don't think so. Qiguan Rang shook his head. His ancestral home was at the border, which was very close to the northern borderline. The customs of the two places were intertwined, and there were many commercial and trade contacts. If there was such a good thing, Qiguan Rang would have heard of it. I don't know who put this thing here. I saw it on the table when I came here. Even if Qiguan Rang did not have a hobby of collecting, he could see the value of the thing in front of him. It was definitely expensive. Feng Jin put the tea bowl back, but his eyes could not help but wonder. He liked it the first time he saw it. Why don't we find someone to ask who came to the government office last night? Such a treasure can't just appear out of thin air. When Feng Jin was about to get up, he saw Xueqi rubbing his eyes. He looked like he did not have enough sleep, and there were still some green circles under his eyes. Wenjing, Huayu, you two are really early today. Xueqi called out. He keenly noticed that the two of them were behaving strangely. Then, his gaze was attracted by the set of incomparably dazzling glass tea set. What is this? The casting material is cold and hard, and there are no gaps. I've never heard of this before. The 3 people surrounded the set of glass tea sets. If Jiang Pengji had not swayed into the government office with a meat bun in her mouth and a pot of red dates and white fungus soup in her hand, the 3 people did not know how long they would be slacking. He frowned and shouted. What are you doing? You don't deal with the government affairs early in the morning. Why are you gathering here for a meeting? Lord. The 3 people heard the movement and greeted one after another. When they looked up, they found that Jiang Pengji was carrying something in her hand. They recognized the red dates and white fungus soup, but they had never seen a lump of red dates and white fungus soup floating in the air. I saw that you have been tired recently, so I asked someone to make this red date soup. The temperature is just right. Jiang Pengji turned over the 3 inverted long glass cups on the table and poured a cup for each of them. The red dates and white fungus soup was personally poured by the Lord. Even if it was poisonous, they had to drink it. Each of you has a cup. Wash it yourself after using it. If you don't mind mixing the cups, I won't say more. Jiang Pengji poured a cup for herself. She found these red dates from the warehouse of the district headquarters. The dates were big and the seeds were small. They tasted very sweet. After being boiled into a thick soup, the sweetness was diluted. She suddenly had a craving for it in the morning, so she asked the maid to help her boil it for more than 2 hours. Jiang Pengji waited for the red dates and white fungus soup to cool down a little before putting it into the big pot. Lord, what is this? Feng Jin looked at the cup in front of him and then at the big pot in Jiang Pengji's hand. Because some red dates and white fungus soup had been poured out, a part of the top was exposed. Feng Jin slightly widened his eyes, as if he had seen a prehistoric monster. Needless to say, the material of the teapot and the teacups on the table came from the same source. His lord was definitely an insider and knew their origins. It's easy to clean a cup for drinking. The only drawback is that it's a little brittle and can't be dropped. Jiang Pengji's answer almost made Feng Jin and the other 2 choke. How could she want to drop such a precious glaze?
Drink it. Don't worry, I didn't cook it. The maid of the district headquarters cooked it for me. It tastes good. The three of them were silent. It was not a matter of whether the red dates and white fungus soup tasted good at all. Xueqi picked up the cup. His fingertips could feel the warmth from the red dates and white fungus soup. Lord, where did these things come from? In fact, he wanted to ask how much it was worth, whether it was expensive, and whether he could buy one with his little wealth. The surface of the cup was smooth and translucent, with a colorful glaze. One could not help but want to gently touch the surface of the cup. The delicate touch was hard to match even for a girl with the most delicate skin. Xueqi not only had a problem with voice, but he also had some fetishes. This could be seen from his reaction when he first touched the bamboo paper. Chapter 439. Among the people present, except for Feng Jin who could still maintain his demeanor, Qiguanrang and Xueqi were shocked. Xueqi, who overreacted, was even more miserable. He almost choked the red dates and white fungus soup into his lungs. He clutched his chest and coughed uncomfortably. What? 30,000 strings of coins? Xueqi coughed for a while to calm down. His voice suddenly rose. His fingers pointing at the cup were trembling. Squandering, squandering. He was very clear about how much money his lord had. Where did he get the 30,000 strings of coins to buy such a flashy but impractical thing? As the housekeeper of the entire district headquarters, Xueqi almost fainted from anger. But he forgot that Jiang Pengji did not have that much money. Even if she used the entire Xiangyang district to pay off the debt, she would not be able to get that much money, let alone embezzling it. The so-called 30,000 strings of coins was just said to tease the three of them. She did not expect them to be so easily teased. Qiguanrang and Feng Jin were the first to react. They looked at the smiling Jiang Pengji with a serious expression. My lord is not the kind of person who indulges in pleasure. Why would you spend 30,000 strings of coins to buy such a thing? Don't tease me. Even though Feng Jin was from the Feng family, he would not spend 30,000 strings of coins to buy a set of collectibles. It was not that he could not afford it, but he was more pragmatic. Tsk, the three of you really can't take a tease. When Coach Meng and Coach Luo come later, don't expose me. With such a playful master, the three of them were also mentally and emotionally exhausted. These things were made last night when I was baking the green bricks in the kiln. The quality is uneven. Those aren't the best glass. I originally wanted to destroy them, but thinking of your hard work, I stole a set and left it in the government office. Jiang Pengji smiled, revealing her white teeth. She looked proud. How about it? Do you think it's worth 30,000 strings of coins? 30,000 strings of coins? Why didn't she just rob the money? Xueqi's face was full of resentment. He thought his lord was a little more mature, but he did not expect her to be so bad. Feng Jin straightened his mind and carefully looked at the object in his hands. After thinking for a while, he slowly opened his mouth. This thing is rare in the world. It can be said to be a work of art. The quality is even more unheard of. If I meet someone who knows how to do it, 30,000 strings of coins is definitely worth it. It's just that. I don't know how much money, manpower, and time are needed to make this thing. 30,000 strings of coins. Rich tycoons who chased after fame would indeed fork out their own money to buy it. They would even happily snatch it. But in today's world, who would spend so much money on a set of luxury goods to enjoy? Jiang Pengji drank the red dates and white fungus soup while listening to Feng Jin. She became more and more confident. I've already said that it's something I made when I was baking the green bricks. How much money, manpower, and time do you think it takes to make it? Jiang Pengji smiled and said, Huayu's judgment is absolutely accurate. After all, he's the second young master of an aristocratic family. If you say that it's worth 30,000 strings of coins, then I'm completely relieved. Why would they be afraid of sales if they operated properly? I'm afraid that the supply will not be able to meet the demand and people will come begging to buy it. Feng Jin and the rest were stunned on the spot. When they understood what Jiang Pengji meant, they were even more shocked. My lord, you mean to say, sell them for 30,000 strings of coins? Jiang Pengji said casually, No, these cups are for you to drink tea. When you drink tea from a ceramic bowl, there's always a muddy taste. Jiang Pengji not only wanted to bake glass products,
But she also wanted to make porcelain that could only be found in the History Museum. However, she was still researching with her companions in the streaming room. It would take a while before she could start production. Seeing the three strategists' dumbfounded expressions, Jiang Pengji said shamelessly, "Your lord, I sympathize with my subordinates. Why would I treat you unfairly and exploit you? The few batches of glass tea sets that are baked in the brick kiln are for sale. Even if your lord plays with mud, she's different from ordinary people. She can play with different tricks. It's not 30,000 strings of coins, it might be 3 million strings of coins, or even more." She wanted to see who would dare to mock her for only playing with mud. If she didn't play with mud, where did the green bricks in Xiangyang district come from? Where did the glass in the brick kiln come from? Although Jiang Pengji didn't show a proud expression, her eyebrows were raised a little more than usual. Feng Jin and the rest were too shocked and didn't notice this detail, but the viewers in the streaming room were sharp-eyed. Jin Tian jigging. Look, the streamer is so proud of herself. Buzia, if you didn't remind me, I wouldn't have noticed this detail. Looking at it now, not only is the streamer's tail high up in the sky, it's practically bringing her to fly to the 9th layer of heaven. Mayan Zizao, the streamer's proud look is asking for a beating, but why do I find it so cute? Don't talk nonsense. Sigh, if that's the case, then I'll silently feel sorry for the fool who is about to be cheated. What is a fool? A fool with a lot of money. Come quickly. Jiang Pengji targeted the 3 tribes of the north borderline and set it as the first stop to cheat money. Although the north borderline always fantasizes about how powerful they are and can't wait to use the whites of their eyes to despise Dongqing, they secretly hold things from the hinterland of the Central Plains in high esteem. Not only do they fight to buy them, they even regard it as a fashion. Their mouths are very stubborn, but their bodies are very honest. The noblewomen and ladies of the north borderline are proud of collecting treasures from the Central Plains. Things that can only be sold for 1 or 2 strings of coins in the Central Plains can be sold for at least 10 times more at the 3 tribes of the north borderline. If it weren't for such profits and the dangerous journey, who would be willing to do business in the north borderline? Xueqi and the other 2 were shocked by Jiang Pengji's bold words. They even forgot how to speak. Feng Jin was the first to react. He said solemnly, "My lord, you have to protect the manufacturing method closely. Don't worry. Before we earn enough money, I'll send someone to keep an eye on the brick kiln." Lu Shi had reminded her about this matter, and Feng Jin mentioned it again. How could Jiang Pengji not take it seriously? She had already thought of a way to deal with it. The rarer something is, the greater its value. If there's too much of it, it'll be worthless. Whoever dares to cut off her source of wealth, she'll cut off her descendants. Suka's expression was dreamy. He only found his voice after a long while. "My lord, these things. How much exactly do they cost?" "They come with the bricks. It's just a few coins, right?" Jiang Pengji said uncertainly. Everyone was silent again. Things that cost a few coins. Selling them for 30,000 strings of coins. Doesn't your conscience hurt? Suka subconsciously raised his hand and touched his chest. They were the ones who earned money. Why should his conscience hurt? Not only did it not hurt, it was also alive and kicking. The 3 of them shouted in unison. "Great! Host V, when this batch of glass is sold, the Xiangyang district government will have the money to pay salaries." Jiang Pengji's words were like a fake bomb that exploded. The audience in the streaming room was so shocked that they couldn't react. Wait, what did the host say? Pay salaries? The audience in the streaming room was still immersed in Jiang Pengji's shamelessness. They didn't expect her to be so shameless. Chapter 440. Such a hard-working, crazy overtime, free, tall, rich, and handsome employee. Please give them a dozen. The audience in the streaming room was in an uproar again. Compared to the streamer, Zhou Bapi had no conscience at all. At least Zhou Bapi would pay people a salary. The streamer had never paid a penny. Streamer V. Look at what you're saying. I gave you a house and I supply the food for the entire district. As soon as she finished speaking, a little angel immediately retorted angrily. Tumi Dalao, hee, a house of 3 pennies, exchanged for food. Streamer, you're really great. Even though she was ridiculed, who was Jiang Pengji? She did not need to take such ridicule to heart. Jiang Pengji said very generously, before this batch of glass is sold, the brick kiln will not continue to produce glass. After all, the rarer something is, the greater its value. The quantity must be strictly controlled. But we will also start to study other things. Oh, you're all on the same side. As the Lord, I can treat everyone badly, but I can't treat you badly. After we're done today, do you want to follow me to the brick kiln and each of you can choose a set? Although the glass was expensive, she knew her family well. She was not a stingy person. She would share blessings. Lucy originally wanted to stay in Xiangyang district for 2 days, but because of the glass, it was delayed for 3 to 4 days. The brick kiln worked day and night, speeding up the firing. The defective products were ruthlessly eliminated and destroyed. The quality glass teaware was carefully packed and placed in a box piled with layers of brocade. Just as Zhang Pengji ridiculed, glass was too fragile. To prevent the treasure from being damaged and losing tens of thousands of strings of coins, the protection work had to be done well. Who could afford to pay for it if it was broken? Although the audience in the streaming room ridiculed her for being too shameless, one thing had to be admitted. No matter how many fakes they were originally made, their true value lay in the market price at the end of the sale. The glass teaware indeed had a market value of tens of thousands of strings of coins. In other words, their lord gave away something that was easily worth tens of thousands of strings of coins? The three of them were a little confused by this explosive news, and they subconsciously opened their mouths to thank him. Zhang Pengji responded with a hum and suddenly changed the topic. Speaking of which, is the red dates and white fungus soup that bad? The red dates and white fungus soup in front of them was almost untouched. The temperature was almost gone. Feng residence. Inner court. He did not know if Chongqing was more like her father or her mother. At such a young age, one could already see her nature of being tormented. Yeah. She muttered a strange sound and used both her hands and feet. Under her unremitting efforts, her chubby body rolled once and finally turned over. Her 2 legs were flapping about, as if she wanted to turn back to her lying position. Wei Jingxian sat next to her and gently helped her to turn over so that she could continue to roll around and play. However, he smiled and said, "The way Chongqing struggled just now was like a little tortoise that couldn't flip itself over." The maidservant at the side added with a smile, "Your servant heard from the old people that children need 4 to 5 months to be able to turn over and crawl around. Little girl's body is strong and healthy. It's only been 3 months. Little girl can already turn over. With such precocious intelligence, perhaps in a few months, foreign will be able to hear the little girl call Yunyang Qin." When Wei Jingxian heard this, the smile on her face became even more gentle. In terms of character, she did not know whether Chongqing took after her or Feng Jin. She was stubborn, lively and active. If Chongqing had to turn over and roll around to play, then she must rely on her own ability. Previously, Wei Jingxian saw that it was difficult for her to roll and she could not turn over for a long time. So, as a mother, she laughed and helped her. Unexpectedly, the child's face turned red and she wailed loudly. She looked like she did not want to give in. Wei Jingxian could only pick her up and coax her in every possible way. However, Chongqing, who bore a grudge, refused to stop. She was really afraid of this child. After that, no matter how Chongqing rolled around on the table, she did not help. After all, a baby's energy was limited. After rolling around and playing for half an afternoon, how could Chongqing bear it? Not long after, Chongqing was already in a state of drowsiness and fell into a deep sleep. When Feng Jin stepped into the afterglow of the setting sun and returned home, he saw Wei Jingxian kneeling beside Chongqing with a faint smile on her lips. His daughter was sprawled out in a deep sleep. He could totally imagine how her sleeping posture would be when she grew up a little bit. How painful it would be for his eyes. When Feng Jin saw that casual sleeping posture, he hardened his heart several times to ask the servant woman to correct the child. However, when he met his daughter's watery eyes, he immediately retreated in defeat. How could he bear to be forceful? Why are you back so early today?" The servant girl heard the movement and saluted, which startled Wei Jingxian, who was in a daze. Feng Jin held a long black wooden box in his arms. He looked a little cautious. He answered, "Yes, there are not many things to do today. I handled them quickly, so I came back early." Wei Jingxian's eyes fell on the long black box curiously. She silently asked what was inside. "It's a gift from the Lord, but it's a little fragile. I can't let Chongqing touch it." It was not that Feng Jin was distressed about the glass tea set, but it was too easy to cut the skin after the glass was broken. In Feng Jin's heart, there was no treasure in the world more precious than his Chongqing. It'll be bad if it gets cut. What is it exactly? Wei Jingxian asked curiously. Feng Jin did not keep her in suspense. He gently put the box down, trying not to make a sound that would disturb Chongqing's sleep. Look, isn't this craftsmanship amazing and peerless? Feng Jin opened the box. It was filled with deliberately cut pieces of cloth of various colors. He took out a delicate teapot. It was the size of his palm. It was exquisite, elegant, and exquisite. It reflected the setting sun in the evening, revealing a charming colorful light. Wei Jingxian was so mesmerized that she almost forgot to breathe. Where did you get this strange thing from? Wei Jingxian covered her mouth with both hands to prevent the sound of her breathing from being too loud. Lanting gave it to me. Not only did I get a share, but Wenjing and the others also sent one. Feng Jin rarely addressed Jiang Pengji as his lord in private. It was not disrespectful, but he was more inclined to treat her as a friend. Wei Jingxian repeated in disbelief, Mr. Qiguan and the others also have a share? She thought that it would be a miracle if there was even one such peerless treasure that excelled the workmanship of the heavens. Yes. Seeing his wife's reaction, Feng Jin suddenly wanted to tease her. How much do you think it sold for? It's such a precious and beautiful thing. The price is definitely not low. It's at least 7,000 or 8,000 strings of coins. Feng Jin smiled and said, Lanting wants to sell it to the nobles of the northern borderline for 30,000 strings of coins. Wei Jingxian's eyes widened in shock. She lost her voice and said, 30,000 strings of coins? Why don't you rob a bank? You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.